Match found.
Stand in my way. I dare you.
Hello, team. Wait. No double initiator. Wait. We need smokes. 2 duelists, a smoker, and a sentinel. Wait.
Yeah, we need smoke.
Yeah, we need the sentinel. Wait. Can you play any sentinels or no? Ah. Smokes. We need smokes. Bro.
Yeah, you can
Okay,
get-
either play smokes or play a duelist, and I will play smoke.
Yeah.
Play a
take
duelist,
smokes.
and I will play smokes, or play smokes, and I will take a duelist. What do you want?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, bro. Bro, next time, please don't install lock. It's kinda hard to do it when someone installs lock. Just talk. We want to take bridge.
Yeah, don't worry. It's because people don't take breach so much, that's why.
Okay.
Their ISO buried hundreds. Let us not be part of that statistic.
Anyone smurfing, guys?
What?
Anyone smurfing here?
Smoke.
No.
Okay.
Cover going out.
Many enemies A.
Reloading.
Reloading. Reloading.
Flash out!
Sky kill. Reloading.
Reloading.
Reloading. Still in sight.
Shadows traveling.
Jet side.
Stealing sight.
60 jet, 60.
Spikes down.
Spike down A. Last player standing. One enemy remaining.
I have the spike. Spike planted.
Okay, Omen. I'll smash in the front door while you sneak in the back. It's a good plan, yeah?
Let's go big.
Reloading.
Yes.
Enemy spotted B.
Shadows traveling.
One on the...
Wait,
Let's go see. Let's go see.
Right
Fast,
there.
fast.
Reloading.
Right there.
Who?
Spike planted.
Healing you.
Last player standing.
Stand tall. We are Valorant. We are fighters.
Stealing sight.
Reloading.
Enemy spotted A.
For you.
Cutting their vision. You're not. My ult's ready.
One dead.
Shadows traveling.
Spike planted.
Be at peace.
Two on backside, two on backside. Backside, Omen.
Shadows traveling.
Blinding.
One enemy remaining.
left side.
Last player
Flash
standing.
out.
Take Vandal.
We have come back from worse. Let's go.
I need this.
Omen, do you know how to play Omen or you just picked him?
Yes.
Right there.
Yes. I will be their nightmare.
Blind.
Here.
Cover
Get
going
out of my way. Enemy spotted A. Reloading.
Enemy spotted.
Reloading.
Shadows traveling.
One enemy remaining.
Blinding.
Flawless.
For you. Once more into battle.
Let's go see,
I'm
let's
not
go see, let's go
tired.
see.
Are you?
Gun here.
Gun here.
Do you want up? Okay, thank you.
Breakthrough.
Okay. Why is no one flashing? Why
Enemy
is no one
spotted
flashing?
C. Cutting their vision.
Reloading. My ultimate is ready.
Concussing.
Shadows traveling.
One look blank.
Here.
Stay blank, comment. Stay blank.
But
Wall
planted.
raised. Here.
Here.
Last player standing.
Stealing sight. No.
Their jet is playing hard to get. Alright, I'll play.
Right there.
No prisoners.
Cover going out.
Still in sight.
Got the spike!
Spotted A.
Spike down A.
Reloading.
Reloading.
Blocking sight. Our spike carrier is killed.
It's you and me.
Bye. My ult's ready. I got the spike.
Last player standing. Team Ace.
Wait until I blind them to strike.
Guys, wait, don't defend.
No.
Let's go B, and if they're B, we just rotate through.
Yes.
Through C.
Cutting their vision.
My turn.
Last player standing. Spike down B.
Acá.
Okay, we know the drill. Stick to your roles and we'll crush it.
Close.
Here.
Oh man. Where are you from?
They're not better than me.
Where? Paris.
You want to play? Let's play.
Still in sight.
Here. Blocking sight.
Reloading.
Tremor!
Barrier created.
Plant the spike.
Here. Spike planted. Return to dust.
Blinding!
Enemy spotted C.
On flank.
Flash out!
Z-City. Right, Z-City.
Let's go!
Eliminate. Reloading.
One enemy remaining.
Enemy spotted C. Your duty is not over.
Last player standing.
Blasting!
Left.
Oh my fucking god.
I'm amped. Let's go. I got things to do.
No.
Watch this. Here. Enemy spotted A.
Enemy spotted A.
Cover going
Reloading.
out.
I've got your trail.
Reloading. Cover going out.
You fought well.
Spotted A.
Last player
Scared
standing.
shadows traveling.
Spike down A.
I have the spike.
Here we go.
Watch them run.
They have
Spike planted.
so be careful.
Shadows traveling. My ultimate is not ready.
Not Kami! What the fuck are you doing?
I survived obliteration. I will survive them.
Right there.
Beats, Brits B, Brits B.
All B, come
Omen,
and shift.
Omen.
All.
Smoke
It
here
begins.
and here, and we can enter.
Get out of my way!
Cover going out.
Good attempt.
Cover going out.
Rest.
Smoke, Omen, Omen, smoke. Omen, use the fucking smoke, you retard. What are you doing?
Carrier is dead.
Spike down
Too
B.
late.
Last player standing.
Blinding!
I know what must be done.
Why? Why stressed? Because we're playing 4v5.
I wanted to kill them both. That's why I stressed.
No, not you, not you,
Yeah,
not you, not you. It's 4v5.
Then you kill one and then you kill the second one.
Not your fault. No smoke. Oh man, why are you playing smoke? Don't know how to play. I can play.
It's you and me.
Concussion!
Cover going out. Enemy spotted.
Last player standing. Spike down C.
Blinding.
Αυτός. Bro, you blind others or you blind yourself?
Last round before the switch.
Spend what you got.
Reloading.
Sorry. Yes.
Keep up.
Here. Cover going out.
Reloading.
Shadows traveling.
Wall raised.
Wait, I flash.
Flash out!
Okay.
Enemy down.
Our carrier
Had
dead.
your fun. My
Spike
turn.
down A.
Enemy spotted A.
Dead.
Reloading.
Blinding!
One enemy remaining. Last player standing. Switching sides.
Time to stock back up. Multiple enemies
All
A.
side, all side.
Flash out!
Multiple enemies A.
Spike planted.
Barrier created. Valiant effort.
Cutting their vision.
One enemy remaining.
We cannot let them unweave our world.
I'll make them remember. They're only human.
Full by full.
Someone go B, please.
Multiple enemies A.
Blinding!
Right, Omen.
Enemy removed.
Last player standing.
7.
7. On the right.
If you must fall, then fall near me.
F5.
Here.
Through the calm, I see. Through the storm, I fight.
Guys, say. Come say, quick. Quick says.
Enemy spotted C.
Stealing sight. Reloading. Cover going out.
Your duty is not over. Reloading.
Gun here. Reloading.
Reloading.
Hey,
Here.
Spike planted.
Here.
Cutting their vision.
Remove.
One enemy remaining.
Did you really expect that to work?
Their backs will be towards at least one of us.
I need a drop. I need a drop.
Here.
Can you buy me, please?
I'm ready.
Siege.
There. Many enemies A. Spike is A. One down. Spotted A. Bye.
One enemy remaining. Flawless.
Amazing. I am honored.
I'll do my job, you do yours.
You want to play? Let's play.
See nothing.
I've got your trail. It's you and me.
Guys, see. Bomb is see.
Opponent killed.
Spike planted.
Enemy spotted C. Here.
Bridge.
Last player standing.
Eliminated.
One enemy remaining.
3 down.
One shot, shit, one shot.
I will not die here. My ultimate is ready.
Guys, I told you from the start of the round that they will go through. I'm going to see always alone. And that's what happens.
We win. We survive. Here.
Get out of my way!
Be faster.
Cover going out.
Many enemies A. Enemy spotted A.
Hey, Sky's mid, guys.
One enemy remaining. Spike down A.
You were beautiful.
Trust me, they'll know what hit them. In i skärselden!
Pathetic. Enemy spotted C.
Oh, see. Each one ZC. Each one ZC. Come.
Blinding!
Last player standing. Spike planted. Thrifty. Match point.
Just swapping in new fusion cells. Okay, my arms are good. We can go.
Maybe see again.
Hej då! Trevor! My ult's ready.
You had your fun. My
Let's go! Me out!
1-3, 1-3.
Right there. Flash out! Blinding!
One enemy remaining.
Your tactics failed.
Race it to the spike sites. Need a drop.
Thanks.
I can buy.
As one.
They will cower.
Enemy
One
spotted.
is guys, shit. See. Quick. Quick, see.
Spike spotted C. Headshot.
Flash out! Does it? Concussing! Blinding!
One enemy
Hit the
remaining.
foe.
Enemy spotted. Go.
Reloading.
Omen, are you
Last player standing.
Omen, are you playing with a blind photos?
Come on! Get me in the line of fire.
Yeah, I can tell.
I need
can
a
tell,
drop.
bro. You live stream and you do a challenge. I'm live streaming also. You wanna follow me?
I need a drop.
Anybody
Talk.
comment? Thank you.
Omen, follow me. Go follow on Twitch. I'm live streaming now.
Chamber C. Chamber C. Chamber C.
Hey, baby.
Enemy
Chamber and
spotted
clove,
C.
C.
Watch
Yes,
this.
long
Enemy
come.
spotted.
He's so...
Enemy spotted.
Shadows traveling.
Come for long.
Cutting their vision.
For you.
Cover going out. To dust.
Are you serious, Jet?
Your duty is not over.
It's you and me.
30 seconds left.
Blinding.
One enemy remaining.
Wait, come here. Shield.
Here.
Yes, yes, yes.
For you.
Don't pick.
Here.
Just pick playtime and...
10 seconds left.
Wait,
Shadows traveling.
Pick.
Big.
They're not getting the message. Leave it to me. I'll rough them up.
Need a drop.
Thank you.
You want to
Get out of
play?
my way.
Let's play.
Enemy spotted A. spotted A. Night night.
Shadows traveling.
Let's stay on safe. Maybe rotate.
Όχι, ίσο A.
Enemy spotted.
I've got your trail.
Enemy spotted A.
Cover going out. Disappear.
Last player standing. Spike planted.
You left.
Attackers win.
About how he had regretted their marriage and how he preferred her chambermaid. What was she to believe, these stories or his geniality when they were together? After he became Tsar Peter III, he would graciously invite Catherine to visit him in the morning, but then he would ignore her. When the royal gardener stopped delivering her favorite fruits, she found out it was on his orders. Peter was doing everything he could to make her life miserable and humiliate her in subtle ways. Fortunately, Catherine figured out early on that he was a master manipulator. His childish exterior was clearly there to distract attention from his petty, vindictive core. His goal, she believed, was to bait her into doing something rash that would give him an excuse to isolate or get rid of her. She decided to bide her time, be as gracious as possible, and win over some key allies in the court and the military, many of whom had come to despise the Tsar. Finally, certain of her allies' support, she instigated a coup that would get rid of him once and for all. When it became clear that the military had sided with Catherine and that he was to be arrested, Peter started to beg and plead with her. He would change his ways and they would rule together. She did not reply. He sent another message saying he would abdicate, if only he could return peacefully to his own estate with his mistress. She refused to bargain. He was arrested and soon thereafter murdered by one of the coup intriguers, perhaps with the approval of the Empress. Catherine was a classic fearless type. She understood that with passive aggressors you must not get emotional and drawn into their endless intrigues. If you respond indirectly with a kind of passive aggression yourself, you play into their hands. They are better at this game than you are. Being underhanded and tricky only spurs on their insecurities and intensifies their vindictive nature. The only way to treat these types is to take bold, uncompromising action that either discourages further nonsense or sends them running away. They respond only to power and leverage. Having allies higher up the chain can serve as a means of blocking them. You are playing the lion to their fox, making them afraid of you. They see there will be real consequences if they continue their behavior in any form. To recognize such types, look for extremes in behavior that are not natural, too kind, too ingratiating, too moral. These are most likely disguises that are worn to deflect attention from their true nature. Better to be proactive and take precautionary measures the moment you feel they are trying to get into your life. Unjust situations. Sometime in the early 1850s, Abraham Lincoln came to the conclusion that the institution of slavery was the great stain on our democracy and had to be eliminated. But as he surveyed the political landscape, he became concerned. The politicians on the left were too noisy and righteous. In their fervor to promote abolition, they would polarize the country, and the slaveholders could easily exploit these political divisions to maintain their way of life for decades. Lincoln was the consummate realist. If your goal is to end an injustice, you have to aim for results, and that requires being strategic and even deceptive. To end slavery, he would be willing to do almost anything. He decided he was the politician best suited for this cause. His first step was to present a moderate front to the public in the 1860 campaign and after his election to the presidency. He gave the impression that his main goal was to maintain the Union and to gradually phase slavery out of existence through a policy of containment. When war became inevitable in 1861, he decided to lay a clever trap for the South, baiting them into an attack on Fort Sumter that would force him to declare war. This made it seem that the North was the victim of aggression. All of these maneuvers were designed to keep his support in the North relatively unified. To oppose him was to oppose his efforts to defeat the South and maintain the Union, the slavery issue slipping into the background. This unified front on his side made it almost impossible for the enemy to play political games. As the tide of the war turned in favor of the North, he gradually shifted to more radical positions, stated in the Emancipation Proclamation and his Gettysburg Address, knowing he had more leeway to reveal his real goals and act on them. Leading the North to victory in the war, he had even more room to continue his campaign. In sum, to defeat slavery, Lincoln was prepared to publicly manipulate opinion by concealing his intentions and to practice outright deceit in his political maneuverings. This required great fearlessness and patience on his part, as almost everyone misread his intentions and criticized him as an opportunist. Some still do. In facing an unjust situation, you have two options. You can loudly proclaim your intentions to defeat the people behind it, making yourself look good and noble in the process. But in the end, this tends to polarize the public. You create one hardened enemy for every sympathizer won over to the cause, and it makes your intentions obvious. If the enemy is crafty, this makes it almost impossible to defeat them. Or, if it is results you are after, you must learn instead to play the fox, letting go of your moral purity. You resist the pull to get emotional, and you craft strategic maneuvers designed to win public support. You shift your position to suit the circumstance, baiting the enemy into actions that will win you sympathy. You conceal your intentions. Think of it as war. Short of unnecessary violence, you are called to do whatever it takes to defeat the enemy. There is no nobility in losing if an injustice is allowed to prevail. Static situations. In any venture, people quickly create rules and conventions that must be followed. This is often necessary to instill some discipline and order. But most often these rules and conventions are arbitrary. They are based on something that was successful in the past but might have little relevance to the present. They are often instruments for those in power to maintain their grip and keep the group unified. If this goes on long enough, they become stultifying and crowd out any new ways for doing things. In such a situation, what is called for is the total destruction of these dead conventions, creating space for something new. In other words, you must be the complete lion, as bad as can be. This was how several important black jazz musicians, such as Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, and Dizzy Gillespie, responded to the musical conventions that had hardened in the early 1940s. From its more freewheeling earlier days, jazz had become co-opted by white performers and audiences. The sound that became popular, big band swing, was more controlled and regimented. To make any money in the business, you had to play by the rules and perform these popular genres. But even those black musicians who followed the conventions were still paid considerably less than their white counterparts. The only way around this oppressive situation was to destroy it with a completely new sound, in this case with something that later became known as bebop. This new genre went against all the current conventions. The music was wild and improvisatory. As it became popular, it gave these musicians some space to perform on their own terms and some control over their careers. Now the static situation was broken and the field was left open to the great jazz innovations of the 1950s and 60s. In general, you must be less respectful of the rules that other people have established. They do not necessarily fit the times or your temperament. And there is great power to be had by being the one to initiate a new order. Impossible dynamics. Sometimes in life you find yourself in a negative situation that cannot be improved no matter what you do. You might find yourself working for people who are irrational. Their actions seem to serve no purpose apart from imposing their power and making you miserable. Everything you do is wrong. Or it could be a relationship in which you are constantly forced to rescue a person. This usually involves types who present themselves as weak victims in need of attention and assistance. They stir up a lot of drama around them. No matter what you do, the need to be rescued keeps recurring. You can recognize this dynamic by your emotional need to somehow solve the problem, mixed with your complete frustration in finding any kind of reasonable answer. In truth, the only viable solution is to terminate the relationship. No arguing, no bargaining, no compromising. You leave the job, there are always others. You leave the person who is tormenting you with as much finality as possible. Resist the temptation to feel any guilt. You need to create as much distance as possible so they cannot inveigle these emotions into you. They must become dead to you so you can go on with your life. Reversal of perspective. The problem with confrontational moments and why we often seek to avoid them is that they churn up a lot of unpleasant emotions. We feel personally aggrieved that someone is trying to hurt or harm us. This makes us wonder about ourselves and feel insecure. Did we deserve this in some way? If we go through a few of these unpleasant moments, we become increasingly skittish. But this is really a problem of perception. In our own inner turmoil, we tend to exaggerate the negative intentions of our opponents. In general, we take conflicts far too personally. People have problems and traumas that they carry with them from their childhood on. Most often, when they do something to harm or block us, it really is not directed at us personally. It comes from some unfinished business from the past or deep insecurities. We happen to cross their path at the wrong moment. It is essential that you develop the reverse perspective. Life naturally involves conflicting interests. People have their own issues, their own agendas, and they collide with yours. Instead of taking this personally or concerning yourself with people's intentions, you must simply work to protect and advance yourself in this competitive game, this bloody arena. Focus your attention on their maneuvers and how to deflect them. When you have to resort to something that isn't conventionally moral, it is just another maneuver you are executing in the game, nothing to feel guilty about. You accept human nature and the idea that people will resort to aggression. This calm, detached perspective will make it that much easier to design the perfect strategy for blunting their aggression. With your emotions unscathed by these battles, you will grow accustomed to them and will even take some pleasure in fighting them well. In the ring, our opponents can gouge us with their nails or butt us with their heads and leave a bruise. But we don't denounce them for it or get upset with them or regard them from then on as violent types. We just keep an eye on them, not out of hatred or suspicion, just keeping a friendly distance. We need to do that in other areas. We need to excuse what our sparring partners do and just keep our distance, without suspicion or hatred. Marcus Aurelius. Chapter 6. Lead from the front, authority. In any group, the person on top consciously or unconsciously sets the tone. If leaders are fearful, hesitant to take any risks, or overly concerned for their ego and reputation, then this invariably filters its way through the entire group and makes effective action impossible. Complaining and haranguing people to work harder has a counterproductive effect. You must adopt the opposite style. Imbue your troops with the proper spirit through your actions, not words. They see you working harder than anyone, holding yourself to the highest standards, taking risks with confidence, and making tough decisions. This inspires and binds the group together. In these democratic times, you must practice what you preach. The hustler king. No man can properly command an army from the rear. He must be at the front, at the very head of the army. He must be seen there, and the effect of his mind and personal energy must be felt by every officer and man present with it. General William T. Sherman. By the spring of 1991, young Curtis Jackson had proved himself to be one of the savviest hustlers in the neighborhood. His pool of repeat customers had increased to a point where he had to hire his own crew to keep up with their demand. But as he knew, nothing good ever lasts too long in the hood. Just as Curtis was making plans to expand his business, an older hustler named Wayne began to make threatening gestures towards him. Wayne had recently returned to the streets from prison. He was determined to make as much money as fast as possible and then dominate the local drug trade. Curtis, it seemed, was his main rival. He tried to intimidate the younger hustler, warning him that he better curtail his operations or pay a price. Curtis ignored him. Then Wayne decided to up the ante. He sent out word on the street that he was going to have Curtis killed. Curtis had seen this happen before and he knew what would happen next. Wayne would never do the job himself. He could not risk a return to prison. Instead, he was banking on the fact that some young kid would hear of his desire to kill Curtis and, eager to gain some street credibility, would take it upon himself to do the dirty work. Sure enough, a few days after hearing of Wayne's intentions, Curtis noticed a young kid named Nitty trailing him on the streets. He felt certain that Nitty was the one planning to do the hit, and it would happen soon. This was the depressing dynamic of hustling in the hood. The more success a hustler had, the more he attracted the wrong kind of attention. Unless he inspired some fear and terror, rivals would keep coming at him, trying to take what he had and continually threatening his position on the streets. Once that started to happen, the once successful dealer would find himself drawn into a cycle of violence, reprisals, and time in the pen. There were a few hustlers, however, who had somehow managed to rise above this dynamic. In the hood, they were like kings. Just hearing their names or seeing them on the street would elicit a gut reaction, a mix of fright and admiration. What elevated them above others was a series of actions they had taken in the past that demonstrated they were fearless and smart. Their maneuvers would be unpredictable and all the more terrifying for it. If people thought of challenging them, they would quickly remember what these types had done in other circumstances and back off. All of this would give them an aura of power and mystery. Instead of challengers on all sides, they would have disciples ready to follow them as far as they wanted. If Curtis saw himself as the kingly type, it was time now to show it to others, as dramatically as possible. With death staring him in the face, he worked to control his emotions and thought long and hard about the dilemma that Wayne had posed. If instead he went after Nitty and killed him, the police would catch Curtis and he would end up in prison for a long time, an equally fortunate result for Wayne. And if he did nothing, Nitty would finish him off. But Wayne's strategy had a fatal flaw: his fear of doing the job with his own hands. He was no king himself, but just another frightened hustler pretending to be tough. Curtis would come after him from an unexpected angle and turn everything around. Without wasting any more time, he asked a member of his crew named Tony to accompany him that afternoon. Together they surprised Nitty on the street, and while Tony held him, Curtis slashed the kid in the face with a razor blade. He did it just deep enough to send him screaming to the hospital and to leave a nice scar for a while. Then a few hours later, he and Tony found Wayne's empty car and shot it up. An ambiguous message that meant either they hoped he was inside or they were taunting him to come out and attack them in the open. The following day, the dominoes fell just as Curtis thought they would. Nitty sought out Wayne, expecting that the two of them would then go together to exact revenge on Curtis. After all, Wayne had been attacked as well. Wayne, however, still insisted the kid do it alone. Now Nitty could see through the game. He was just the patsy to do the dirty work, and Wayne was not as tough as he had made himself out to be. Nitty would have nothing more to do with him, but he was also too afraid to take on Curtis by himself. He decided he could live with the scar. Wayne was now in a delicate position. If he asked someone else to do the job, it would start to look like what it was: a man too scared to do it himself. Better to let the whole thing just go away. In the days to come, the hood was abuzz with the story of what had happened. Young Curtis had outmaneuvered and outsmarted the older rival. Unlike the latter, he was unafraid to do the violence himself. What he had done was bold and dramatic. It had come out of nowhere. Every time people would see Nitty on the streets with the long scar on his face, they were reminded of the incident. Rivals would now have to think twice before challenging his status. He showed he was tough and crafty. And those in his crew were duly impressed with his sang-froid and how he had turned the situation around. They now saw him differently, as somebody who could last in this jungle and was worth following. Curtis followed this up with other similar actions, and slowly he elevated himself above the other hustlers. Now there were younger ones who looked up to him and would soon form the core of a devoted band of disciples who would help him in his transition into music. After the success of his first album in 2003, Curtis, now known as 50 Cent, began to realize his dream of forging a business empire. But as this took shape in the months and years to follow, he began to feel that something was wrong. It would be natural to believe that with his current position and fame, those working for him would simply follow his lead and do what he wanted. But his whole life had been a lesson in the opposite. People continually take from you. They doubt your powers and challenge you. In this environment, his executives and managers were not trying to take his money or his life, but rather he had the feeling they were nibbling away at his power, trying to soften his image and make him more corporate and predictable. If he let this go on, he would lose the only quality that made him different: his propensity to take risks and do the unexpected. He might become a safe investment, but he would no longer be a leader and a creative force. In this world, you cannot relax and rest on your name, your past achievements, your title. You have to fight to impose your difference and compel people to follow your lead. All of these thoughts became painfully clear to him in the summer of 2007. His third album, Curtis, was to be released in September of that year, and everyone seemed to be asleep. The record label, Interscope, was acting as if the album would sell itself. His management team had put together a marketing campaign that he felt was too tame, passive, and corporate. They were trying to control too much. Then one August afternoon, an employee at G-Unit Records, 50's own label within Interscope, told him that a video from the upcoming album somehow just got leaked to the internet. If it spread, it would mess up the carefully orchestrated rollout of songs that had been planned for that month. 50 was the first to hear of this, and after contemplating what to do next, he decided it was finally time to shake up the dynamic, do the unpredictable, and play the part of the hustler king. He called into his office his radio and internet team at G-Unit. Instead of working to contain the viral spread of the video, the usual response to such a problem and what management would advocate, he ordered them to surreptitiously leak it to other sites and let it spread like wildfire. On top of this move, they created the following story to tell journalists for public consumption. When 50 heard of the leak, he flew into a wild rage. He threw his phone at the window with such force he cracked it. He tore the plasma TV off the wall and smashed it into pieces. He left the building in a fit, and the last thing they heard him yelling was that he was shutting it all down and going on vacation. That evening, on 50's orders, they had the maintenance man for the building take pictures of the damage, all faked for this purpose, and then leaked the photos to the internet. They were to keep all of this a secret. Not even management was to know that this drama was completely manufactured. In the days to come, 50 watched with satisfaction as this story spread everywhere. Interscope was awakened from its slumber. Management was sent the message that he was now in command. If he refused to do any more publicity, as he had threatened, their whole campaign was doomed. They had to follow his lead here and let him set the tone for the publicity, which meant something more aggressive and fluid. Among 50's executives and employees, word spread quickly of what had supposedly happened. His reputation for being unpredictable and violent brought to life. When they now saw him in the offices, they felt a twinge of fear. Better to pay attention to what he wanted than risk witnessing his anger. And for the public, this was just the kind of story they expected from the thug rapper. Compelled their attention. They could laugh at his out-of-control antics, not realizing that it was 50, directing the drama, who would have the last laugh. The fearless approach. When I reached the top in business, I adjusted to my new position. I became bolder and crazier than before, and I listened even less to people who tried to slow me down. 50 Cent. Throughout history, we have witnessed the following pattern. Certain people stand out from the crowd because of some special skill or talent that they have. Perhaps they are masters at the political game, knowing how to charm and win the proper allies. Or maybe they have superior technical knowledge in their field. Or maybe they are the ones who initiate some bold venture that has success. In any event, these types suddenly find themselves in leadership positions, something for which their past experience and education has not prepared them. Now they are alone and on the top, their every decision and action scrutinized by the group and the public. The pressures can be intense. And what inevitably happens is that many of them unconsciously succumb to all kinds of fears. Whereas before they might have been bold and creative, now they grow cautious and conservative, aware of the heightened stakes. Secretly scared of being held accountable for the success of the group, they overdelegate, poll everyone for their opinions, or refrain from making the hard decisions. Or they become excessively dictatorial, trying to control everything, another sign of weakness and insecurity. It is the story of great senators who make lousy presidents, bold lieutenants who turn into mediocre generals, or top-level managers who become incompetent executives. And yet among the group there are inevitably a few who demonstrate the opposite. They rise to the position, displaying extraordinary leadership skills that no one had suspected were in them. We find in this group people like Napoleon Bonaparte, Mahatma Gandhi, and Winston Churchill. What links these people together is not some mysterious skill or bit of knowledge, but rather a quality of character, a temperament that reveals the essence of the art. They are fearless. They do not shrink from making the hard decisions by themselves. Instead, they seem to relish such responsibility. They do not suddenly become more conservative, but in fact show a propensity for bold action. They exhibit tremendous grace under fire. Such types come to understand in various ways that a leader has a unique power that generally goes untapped. Any group tends to assume the spirit and energy of the person on top. If that person is weak and passive, then the group tends to splinter into factions. If such leaders lack confidence, Their insecurities tend to filter their way down the line. Their nervous, fretful moods put everyone on edge. But there is always the opposite possibility. A leader who is audacious, out in front, and setting the tone and agenda for the group sparks a higher energy level and confidence. Such a person on top does not need to yell or push people around. Those below want to follow his or her lead because it is strong and inspiring. In war, where leadership skills are more immediately apparent and necessary because lives are at stake, we can distinguish two leadership styles, from behind or from the front. The former type of general likes to stay in his tent or headquarters and bark out orders, feeling that having such distance makes it easier to command. This style can also mean involving lieutenants and other generals in important decisions, choosing to lead by committee. In both cases, the commander is trying to hide himself from scrutiny, accountability, and danger. The greatest generals in history, however, are invariably those who lead from the front and by themselves. They can be seen by the troops at the head of the army, exposing themselves to the same fate as any foot soldier. The Duke of Wellington said that the mere appearance of Napoleon Bonaparte at the head of his army translated into the equivalent of an additional 40,000 men. A kind of electrical charge passes through the troops. He is sharing in their sacrifices, leading by example. It has almost religious connotations. We notice the same two styles in business and politics as well. The executives who lead from behind will always try to disguise it as a virtue, the need for secrecy, or their desire to be more fair and democratic. But it really stems from fear, and it invariably leads to a lack of respect from those below. The opposite style, leading from the front and by example, has the same power in the office as it does on the battlefield. Leaders who work harder than anyone else, who practice what they preach, who are not afraid to be accountable for tough decisions or to take risks, will find they have created a well of respect that will pay great dividends down the road. They can ask for sacrifices, punish troublemakers, and make occasional mistakes all without facing the usual grumbling and doubts. They don't have to yell, complain, and force their men and women to follow. People do so willingly. In urban environments such as Southside Queens, respect is an extremely important issue. In other places, your background, education, or resume might lend you some authority and credibility, but not in the hood. There, everyone starts from zero. To gain respect from your peers, you must repeatedly prove yourself. People are constantly prone to doubting your abilities and your power. You must show again and again that you have what it takes to thrive and to last. Big words and promises mean nothing. Only actions carry weight. If you are authentic, as tough as you seem to be, then you will earn the respect that will make people back off and make your life that much easier. This should be your perspective as well. You start with nothing in this world. Any titles, money, or privilege you inherit are actually hindrances. They delude you into believing you are owed respect. If you continue to impose your will, because of such privileges, people will come to disdain and despise you. Instead, only your actions can prove your worth. They tell people who you are. You must imagine that you are continually being challenged to show that you deserve the position you occupy. In a culture full of fakery and hype, you will stand out as someone authentic and worthy of respect. The greatest leaders in history all inevitably learned by experience the following lesson. It is much better to be feared and respected than to be loved. As a prime example, look at the film director John Ford, the man behind some of the greatest films in Hollywood history. The task of film directors can be particularly difficult. They have to deal with large crews, actors with their delicate egos, and dictatorial producers who want to meddle every step of the way, all the while being under extreme time limits and with large amounts of money at stake. The tendency for directors is to give ground on these various battlefields, to placate and cajole the actors, to let the producers have their way here and there, to gain some cooperation by being pleasant and likable. Ford was by nature a sensitive and empathetic man, but he learned that if he revealed this side of his personality, he quickly lost control over the final product. The actors and producers would begin to assert themselves, and the film would lose any sense of cohesion. He noticed that the notoriously nice directors never really lasted very long. They were pushed around and their films were lousy. Early on in his career, he decided he would have to forge a kind of mask for himself, that of a man who was implacable and even a bit frightening. On the set, he made it clear he was not the usual prima donna director. He would work longer hours than anyone. If they were filming on some location with harsh conditions, he would sleep in a tent like everyone else and share their bad food. On occasion, he would get into violent fistfights on the set, most often with his leading actors such as John Wayne. These fights were not for show. They were bruising, and he engaged in them with all his strength, making the actors fight back with equal force. This would set a tone. An actor would tend to feel embarrassed by engaging in his usual prissy behavior and ego tantrums. Everyone was treated the same. Even the Archduke of Austria, trying to carve out a career as a Hollywood actor, was yelled at and pushed into a ditch by Ford himself. He had a unique way of directing actors. He would say only a few well-chosen words about what he wanted from them. Then, if they did the wrong thing on the set, he would brutally humiliate them in front of everyone. They quickly learned they had to pay attention to the few words he spoke and to his body language on the set, which would often tell more. They had to raise their levels of concentration and bring even more of themselves into the part. Once, when the famous producer Samuel Goldwyn visited the set, he told Ford he just wanted to watch him work, a producer's way of spying and applying pressure. Ford didn't say a word. The next day, however, he visited Goldwyn in his office and just sat silently in the chair by Goldwyn's desk, glaring at him. After a while, Goldwyn, exasperated, asked him what he was doing. He just wanted to watch Goldwyn work, Ford answered. Goldwyn never visited him again on the set and quickly learned to give him his space. All of this had a strange and paradoxical effect on the cast and crew. They came to love working for John Ford and would die to gain a place among his exclusive team of return staff. His standards were so high it forced them to work harder. He made them superior actors and technicians. An occasional nice gesture or compliment on his part carried double the weight and would be remembered for a lifetime. The end results of his tough and unforgiving manner was that he managed to maintain a higher degree of control over the final product than most other directors, and his films were consistently of the highest quality. Nobody dared to challenge his authority, and he lasted in Hollywood as the king of westerns and action films for well over 40 years. An unprecedented achievement in the industry. Understand, to be a leader often requires making tough choices, getting people to do things against their will. If you have chosen the soft, pleasing, compliant style of leadership, out of fear of being disliked, you will find yourself with less and less room to compel people to work harder or make sacrifices. If you suddenly try to be tough, they often feel wounded and personally upset. They can move from love to hate. The opposite approach yields the opposite result. If you build a reputation for toughness and getting results, people might resent you, but you will establish a foundation of respect. You are demonstrating genuine qualities of leadership that speak to everyone. Now, with time and a well-founded authority, you have room to back off and reward people, even to be nice. When you do so, it will be seen as a genuine gesture, not an attempt to get people to like you, and it will have double the effect. Keys to fearlessness. For it is a general rule of human nature that people despise those who treat them well and look up to those who make no concessions. Thuridites. Thousands of years ago, our most primitive ancestors formed groups for power and protection. But as these groups got larger, they encountered a problem with human nature that plagues us to this day. Individuals have different levels of talent, ambition, and assertiveness. Their interests do not necessarily converge on all points. When it comes to the important decisions upon which the fate of the tribe hangs, the members will often think of their own narrow agendas. A group of humans is always on the verge of splintering into a chaos of divergent interests. For this purpose, leaders were chosen to make the hard decisions and end all the dissension. But the members of the tribe would inevitably feel ambivalence towards their leaders. They saw the necessity for them and the respect that should be paid to their authority, but they feared that their chieftains and kings would accumulate too much power and oppress them. They often wondered why this particular person or family deserved such a lofty position. In many ancient cultures, the king was ritually put to death after a few years to ensure he would not turn into an oppressor. In more advanced ancient civilizations, there were constant rebellions against those in power, much more intense and numerous than anything we have known in the modern era. Of all the leaders in ancient times who had to deal with such difficulties, none stands out more than Moses. He had been chosen by God to lead the Hebrews out of slavery in Egypt and to the Promised Land. Although the Hebrews suffered in Egypt, they had relative security. Moses rested them from this predictable life and set them to wander for 40 years in the wilderness, where they were plagued by a lack of food, shelter, and basic comforts. They constantly doubted Moses and even came to hate him, some plotting to kill him as the king who needed to be sacrificed. They saw him as an oppressor and madman. To aid his cause, God would perform regular miracles to show that Moses was chosen and blessed. But these miracles were quickly forgotten, and the Hebrews kept resorting to their endless complaining and recalcitrance. To overcome the seemingly impossible obstacles in his path, Moses resorted to a unique solution. He united the 12 constantly divided tribes around a single, simple cause, one God to worship, and the attainable goal of reaching the Promised Land. He was not there for power or glory but merely to lead them to this much-desired goal. Moses could not afford to absent himself for a day or two, or to ease up on his leadership. The tribes were continually prone to doubt him and forget the larger picture, the reason for their suffering. The Hebrew word for lead means to be out in front, to drive. He had to be out there constantly in the vanguard, unifying them around his vision of the promised land. This meant being ruthless with internal dissenters, putting whole families to death that stood in the way of the larger cause. In essence, Moses learned to play a role for the Hebrews, the man who is possessed of a vision from God, indomitable in spirit, and acting for the greater good. A normal tribe member would have to ask him or herself if this promised land was not something that existed merely in Moses's mind. But the force of his conviction and the determination to lead people to the promised land made it hard to doubt him. He had to play this role to the hilt to convince them his top position was legitimate and sanctioned by God. His ability to lead such a fractious group for some 40 years has to be considered the greatest masterpiece of leadership in history. We moderns believe we have moved far beyond our primitive tribal origins. After all, we live in a secular, rational world. A leader today needs to possess certain technical and managerial skills. But 3,000 years of civilization have not altered human nature, and in fact the endless difficulties that plagued such leaders as Moses have become only more acute. Whereas before we humans might think first of the tribe, we now think primarily of ourselves, our careers, and our narrow interests. Office politics is the extreme endpoint of this trend. We are now more distracted than ever, with thousands of bits of information competing for our attention in the course of a day. This makes us less patient and capable of seeing the larger picture. If we were being led out of slavery, we would not be able to focus on the promised land for more than a few minutes. We are much more skeptical when it comes to those in authority. We still feel the ancient ambivalence towards rulers. Instead of sacrificing them, we feed them to the press and secretly gloat in their downfall. To be a leader now means overcoming these aspects of human nature while still seeming to be fair and decent, an almost impossible task. At the same time, however, people feel this division and selfishness as a depressing phenomenon. They desperately want to believe in a cause, to work for the greater good, to follow a leader who imbues them with a sense of purpose. They are more than receptive to the kind of quasi-religious leadership that Moses embodies. As the one on top, you must rid yourself of your modern prejudices, your fetishism of technical means. To be a leader still means that you are playing a role, out in front, fearlessly driving the group forward. If you fail to unify the group around some glorious cause, some equivalent of the promised land, then you will find that you are having to push and pull your followers who are constantly splitting up into factions. Instead, you must assume a prophetic air, as if you were merely chosen to lead them towards some higher goal. You are compelling them to follow on their own, making less a show of personal power and more a demonstration of the cause that unites them all. This will give you the proper authority to lead and an aura of power. To master the art of leadership, you must see yourself as playing certain parts that will impress your disciples and make them more likely to follow you with the necessary enthusiasm. The following are the 4 main roles you must learn to perform. The visionary. By the beginning of the 20th century, Thomas Alva Edison was seen as America's preeminent inventor and scientist. His research labs were the source of some of the most important technological breakthroughs of the time. But the truth is that Edison himself had only a few months of formal education and was not really a scientist at all. Instead, he was a mix of visionary, strategist, and shrewd businessman. His method was simple. He scoured the globe, looking at all of the latest advances in science and technology. With his understanding of business and the latest social trends, he thought long and hard about how some of these advances could be translated into products with great commercial appeal that could transform how people lived, electricity lighting up cities, improved telephones altering the course of commerce, motion pictures entertaining the masses. He would then hire the best minds in these fields to bring to life his ideas. Every product that came through his lab was inevitably stamped with Edison's particular vision and sense of marketing. Understand, a group of any size must have goals and long-term objectives to function properly. But human nature serves as a great impediment to this. We are naturally consumed by immediate battles and problems. We find it very difficult, if not unnatural, to focus with any depth on the future. Thinking ahead requires a particular thought process that comes with practice. It means seeing something practical and achievable several years down the road, and mapping out how this goal can be achieved. It means thinking in branches, coming up with several paths to get there, depending on circumstances. It means being emotionally attached to this idea, so that when 1,000 distractions and interruptions seem to push you off course, you have the strength and purpose to keep at it. Without one person on top who charts the way to this larger goal, the group will wander here and there, grasping at schemes for quick money, or be moved by the narrow political aspirations of one member or another. It will never accomplish anything great. You, as the leader, are the only bulwark against this endless wandering. You must have the strength to stamp the group with your own personality and vision, giving it a core and an identity. If you lose sight of the larger picture, then only bad things will ensue. You must play this visionary role with some dramatic flair, like Edison, who was a consummate performer and promoter. He would give dazzling presentations of his ideas and stage events to get on the front page of newspapers. Like Moses describing the promised land, he could paint an alluring picture of the future that his inventions would help create. This drew in money from investors and inspired his researchers to work even harder. Your own level of excitement and self-belief will convince people that you know where you are going and should be followed. The unifier. When Louis XIV began ruling France in 1661, he inherited an almost impossible situation. The feudal dukes and lords of France maintained tight control over their various realms. Recent ministers, such as the Duc de Richelieu and Cardinal Mazarin, had made most of the important decisions that lay outside the control of the lords. The king had been mostly a figurehead, presiding over a deeply fractured country whose power in Europe had been on the decline for quite some time. Louis was determined to reverse all of this, and his method was powerful and dramatic. At first he kept his intentions to himself, and then suddenly he announced to one and all that he would not appoint a minister to run the country. From now on that would be his task. Next, he ordered the aristocracy to take up residence in the Palace of Versailles that he had recently constructed. The closer they lived to him in the palace, the more influence they would have. If they remained in their duchies to conspire against him, they would find themselves isolated from the new center of power he had created. His most brilliant maneuver, however, was the most subtle one of all. He created a cause for the French people to believe in the greatness and glory of France itself, which had as its mission to be the center of civilization and refinement, the model for all of Europe. For this purpose, he led the country into various wars to extend France's political might. He became the preeminent patron of the arts, making France the cultural envy of Europe. He created impressive spectacles to delight and distract the public from his power moves. The nobility were not fighting for Louis but for the greatness of the nation. In this way, he transformed a deeply divided, almost chaotic country into the supreme power of Europe. Understand, the natural dynamic of any group is to splinter into factions. People want to protect and promote their narrow interests, so they form political alliances from within. If you force them to unite under your leadership, stamping out their factions, you may take control, but it will come with great resentment. They will naturally suspect you are increasing your power at their expense. If you do nothing, you will find yourself surrounded by lords and dukes who will make your job impossible. A group needs a centripetal force to give it unity and cohesion, but it is not enough to have that be you and the force of your personality. Instead, it should be a cause that you fearlessly embody. This could be political, ethical, or progressive. You are working to improve the lives of people in your community, for instance. This cause elevates your group above others. It has a quasi-religious aura to it, a kind of cult feeling. Now, to fight or doubt you from within is to stand against this cause and seem selfish. The group, infused with this belief system, will tend to police itself and root out troublemakers. To play this role effectively, you must be a living example of this cause, much as Louis exemplified the civilizing power of France in his own carefully crafted behavior. The role model. You cannot control a large group on your own. You will turn into a micromanager or dictator. making yourself exhausted and hated. You need to develop a team of lieutenants who are infused with your ideas, your spirit, and your values. Once you have such a team, you can give them latitude to operate on their own, learning for themselves and bringing their own creativity to the cause. This is the system that Napoleon Bonaparte initiated and has since been imitated by the greatest generals of the modern era. He would give his field marshals a clear sense of the goals for a particular campaign or battle, what has become known as the mission statement. They were then empowered to reach those goals on their own, in their own way. All that mattered were the results. The idea behind it is that those who are fighting on the ground often have a better sense of what needs to be done in the here and now. They have more information at their fingertips than the leader. With a degree of trust in their decisions, they can operate fast and feel more engaged in the execution of the war. This revolutionary system allowed Napoleon's army to move with greater speed and to cultivate a team of highly experienced and brilliant field marshals. And it took great courage on his part to trust in them and not try to control everything on the battlefield. Operating with a mission statement is an effective way of softening your image and disguising the extent of your power. You are seen as more than just a leader. You are a role model, instructing, energizing, and inspiring your lieutenants. In crafting this team, look for people who share your values and are open to learning. Do not be seduced by a glittering resume. You want them near you to absorb your spirit and ways of doing things. Once you feel they have the proper training, you must not be afraid to let go of the reins and give them more independence. In the end, this will save you much energy and allow you to continue focusing on the greater strategic picture. The bold knight. Every group has a kind of collective energy, and on its own this will tend towards inertia. This comes from people's powerful desires to keep things comfortable, easy, and familiar. Over time, in any group, conventions and protocol will assume greater importance and govern people's behavior. The larger the group, the more conservative it will tend to become, and the greater this force of inertia. The paradox is that this defensive, passive posture has a depressing effect on morale, much like sitting in one place for too long will lower your spirits. More than likely you rose to the top by virtue of your boldness and desperate desire to get ahead. You took risks that made you rise to the occasion with all of your energy and creativity, and this fearless spirit attracted positive attention. The group inertia will naturally tend to tamp all of that down and neutralize the source of your power. Since you are the leader, you are the one who can alter this and set a pace that is more alive and active. You remain the bold and enterprising knight. You force yourself to initiate new projects and domains to conquer. You take proactive measures against possible dangers on the horizon. You seize the initiative against your rivals. You keep your group marching and on the offensive. This will excite them and give them a feeling of movement. You are not taking unnecessary risks, but simply adding a dash of aggression to your normally staid group. They become used to seeing you out in front and grow addicted to the excitement you bring with each new campaign. Reversal of perspective. We live in times of great mistrust of any form of authority. Some of this springs from envy of those who have power and have achieved something. Some of it comes from experiences with people who abuse their position of power to get their way. In any event, such distrust makes it harder and harder to be a strong and effective leader. Under the sway of this leveling force, you yourself might be tempted to act with less authority, to be more like everyone else, or to make yourself likable. This will only make your job that much harder. Instead, it is better that you see the whole concept of authority in a different light. The word authority comes from the Latin root autor, meaning authore, person who creates something new. This could be a work of art, a new way of operating in the world, or new values. The health of any society depends on those who infuse it with such innovations. These works or actions by individuals give them credibility and authority to do more. The great Roman general Scipio Africanus the Elder invented a whole new style of warfare in the campaign against Hannibal that was tremendously successful. This gave him the authority to lead the campaign itself and later to launch a political career. For the Romans, if you simply acted as if your position entitled you to certain powers, you lost your authority. You were no longer an author, a contributor, but a passive consumer of power. As a leader, this is how you must view yourself as well. You are an author creating a new order, writing a new act in some drama. You never rest on your laurels or past achievements. Instead, you are constantly taking action that moves the group forward and brings positive results. That record speaks for itself. Despite the spirit of the times, People have a secret yearning to be guided by a firm hand, by someone who knows where they are going. It is distressful to always feel distracted and wandering. The members of your group will give you the respect and authority you require if you earn it as an author and creator. In the end, if people mistrust and resist your authority, you really have only yourself to blame. A distinguished commander without boldness is unthinkable. No man who is not bold can play such a role, and therefore we consider this quality the first prerequisite of the great military leader. How much of this quality remains by the time he reaches senior rank, after training and experience have affected and modified it, is another question. The greater the extent to which it is retained, the greater the range of his genius. Karl von Clausewitz. Chapter 7. Know your environment from the inside out connection. Most people think first of what they want to express or make, then find the audience for their idea. You must work the opposite angle, thinking first of the public. You need to keep your focus on their changing needs, the trends that are washing through them. Beginning with their demand, you create the appropriate supply. Do not be afraid of people's criticisms. Without such feedback, your work will be too personal and delusional. You must maintain as close a relationship to your environment as possible, getting an inside feel for what is happening around you. Never lose touch with your base. Hood economics. I knew that the ghetto people knew that I never left the ghetto in spirit, and I never left it physically any more than I had to. I had a ghetto instinct. For instance, I could feel if tension was beyond normal in a ghetto audience, and I could speak and understand the ghetto's language. Malcolm X. Starting out as a drug dealer at the age of 12, Curtis Jackson faced an unfamiliar world that contained all kinds of dangers. The business side of hustling was relatively easy to figure out. It was the people, the various actors in the game, the rival hustlers, the big-time dealers, the police who could be tricky. But strangest and most impenetrable of all was the world of the drug users themselves, the clientele upon which his business depended. Their behavior could be erratic and even downright frightening. With rival hustlers and the police, Curtis could get inside their way of thinking because they all operated with a degree of rationality. But the drug fiends seemed to be dominated by their needs, and they could turn unfriendly or violent at any moment. Many dealers developed a kind of phobia of the fiends. They saw in them the weaknesses and dependence that could befall anyone who succumbed to addiction. The hustler relies on his razor-sharp mind. To even flirt with drug use could destroy such power and lead him down the slippery slope towards dependence. If he was around the fiends too much, he could become a user himself. Curtis understood this and kept his distance from them, but this aspect of hustling bothered him. On one particular occasion, the fiends were suddenly avoiding him and he could not figure out why. All he knew was that he could not sell a batch of drugs that he had on consignment. Under such an arrangement, a higher-up source or connect had given him the drugs for free. Once he sold the entire lot, he would return a specified amount of the earnings to the connect and keep the rest as profit. But in this instance, it looked like he would not make nearly enough to pay back the connect. That could prove damaging to his reputation and lead to all kinds of trouble. He might have to steal to get the money. Feeling somewhat desperate, he went into full hustling mode, working night and day, offering all kinds of discounts, whatever it took to unload the drugs. He managed to make back just enough, but it was a close call. Perhaps the quality of the batch he was selling was inferior, but how could he tell beforehand, and how could he prevent this from happening again and again? One day he sought the advice of a man named Dre, an older hustler who had lasted an unusually long time dealing drugs on the streets. He was considered a sharp businessman. In prison, he had studied economics on his own, and he seemed to have an especially good rapport with the fiends. Dre explained to Curtis that in his experience there are two kinds of hustlers in this world. The outside types never bother to learn anything about their customers. It's just about money and numbers. They have no concept of psychology or the nuances of people's needs and demands. They're afraid of getting too close to the customer. That might force them to reassess their ideas and methods. The superior hustler moves to the inside. He's not afraid of the fiends. He wants to find out what's going on in their heads. Drug users are no different from anyone else. They have phobias and bouts of boredom and a whole inner life. Because you remain on the outside, he told Curtis, you don't see any of this and your hustling is purely mechanical and dead. To raise your game, he explained, you have to first put into practice one of the oldest hustling tricks in the book, the tester. What this means is the following. Whenever you get a batch of drugs, you separate a portion of it to give out for free to certain fiends. They tell you right there on the spot whether the stuff is good or bad. If their feedback is positive, they will spread the word through their own networks, and such reports are so much more credible coming from a fellow user than reports from a hustler hyping his own stuff. If the feedback is negative, you will have to adjust and find some way to cut it to offer illusions. Apparent 2-for-1 deals with the capsule simply loaded with dust, whatever it takes to unload it. But you must always operate with feedback on the quality of your product. Otherwise, you will not survive on these streets. Once you have the system in place, you use it to cultivate relationships with your most reliable fiends. They supply you with valuable information about any kind of change in tastes that are happening. Talking to them, you get all kinds of ideas for marketing schemes and new angles for hustling. You gain a feel for how they think. From this inside position, the whole game explodes into something creative and alive with possibility. Curtis quickly incorporated this system and soon discovered that the drug fiends were not at all as he had imagined. They became erratic only when you were not consistent in your dealings with them. They valued convenience and fast transactions, wanted something new every now and then, and loved the thought of any kind of deal. With this growing body of knowledge, he could play to their needs and manipulate their demand. He discovered something else. Spending much of their time on the streets, they were a great source of information about what was going on with the police or the weaknesses of rival hustlers. Knowing so much about the neighborhood gave him a feeling of great power. Later, he would translate this same strategy to music and his mixtape campaign on the streets of New York. Maintaining a close connection to the tastes of his fans, he would alter his music to their responses and create the kind of sound that had a visceral appeal, something they had never heard before. After the remarkable success of his first 2 commercial albums, Curtis, now known as 50 Cent, stood on top of the music world, but his sense of connection, so vital on the streets, was fading in this new environment he now inhabited. He was surrounded by flatterers who wanted to be in his entourage, and managers and industry people who saw in him only dollar signs. His main interactions were with people in the corporate world or other stars. He could no longer hang out on the streets or get first-hand looks at the trends that were just starting up. All of this meant that he was flying blind with his music, not really sure if it would connect anymore with his audience. They were the source of his energy and spirit, but the distance separating them was growing. Other stars seemed to not mind this. In fact, they enjoyed living in this kind of celebrity bubble. They were afraid of coming back down to earth. 50 felt the opposite, but there seemed to be no way out. Then, in early 2007, he decided to start up his own website. He thought of it as a way to market his music and merchandise directly to the public, without the screen of his record label, which was proving quite inept in adapting to the internet age. Soon this website transformed itself into a social networking site like Facebook for his fans, and the more he delved into it, the more he began to sense that this represented much more than a marketing gimmick. It was perhaps the ultimate tool for reconnecting with his audience. First, he decided to experiment. As he prepared to launch a G-Unit record in the summer of 2008, he leaked one of the songs onto the website on a Friday night. Then the next day he refreshed the comments page every few minutes and tracked the members' responses to it. After several hundred comments, it was clear that the verdict was negative. The song was too soft, they judged. They wanted and expected something harder from a G-Unit record. Taking their criticisms to heart, he shelved the song and soon released another, creating the hard sound they had demanded. This time, the response was overwhelmingly positive. This called for more experiments. He put up the latest single from his archenemy, The Game, hoping to read negative comments from his fans. To his surprise, many of them liked the song. He engaged in an online debate with them and had his eyes opened about changes in people's tastes and why they might have grown distant from his music. It forced him to rethink his own direction. To draw more people to his site, he decided to break down the distance in both directions. He posted blogs on personal subjects and then responded to his fans' comments. They could feel they had complete access to him. Using the latest advances in phone technology, he took this further, having his team film him on their cell phones wherever he went. These images were then streamed live on the website. This generated intense traffic and online chatter. Fans would never know when such moments could happen, so they were forced to check in at regular intervals to try to catch these spontaneous moments, sometimes riveting in their banality, other times made dramatic by 50's flair for confrontation. Membership grew by leaps and bounds. As it evolved, the website came to strangely resemble the world of hustling that he had created for himself on the streets of Southside Queens. He could produce testers, trial songs, for his fans, who were like drug fiends, constantly hungry for new product from 50, and he could get instant feedback on their quality. He could develop a feel for what they were looking for and how he could manipulate their demand. He had moved from the outside to the inside, and the hustling game came alive once more, this time on a global scale. The fearless approach. The public is never wrong. When people don't respond to what you do, they're telling you something loud and clear. You're just not listening. 50 Cent. All living creatures depend for their survival on their relationship to their environment. If they are particularly sensitive to any kind of change, a danger or an opportunity, they have greater power to dominate their surroundings. It is not simply that the hawk can see farther than any other creature, but that it can see great detail, picking out the slightest alteration in the landscape. Its eyes give it tremendous sensitivity and supreme hunting prowess. We live in an environment that is mostly human. It consists of the people that we interact with day in and day out. These humans come from many varied backgrounds and cultures. They are individuals with their own unique experiences. To know people well, their differences, their nuances, their emotional life, would give us a great sense of connection and power. We would know how to reach them, communicate more effectively, and influence their actions. But so often we remain on the outside and lack this power. To connect to the environment in this way would mean having to move outside ourselves, train our eyes on people, but so often we prefer to live in our heads, amid our own thoughts and dreams. We strive to make everything in the world familiar and simple. We grow insensitive to people's differences, to the details that make them individuals. At the root of this turning inward and disconnect is a great fear, one of the most primal known to man, and perhaps the least understood. In the beginning, our primitive ancestors formed groups for protection. To create a sense of cohesion, they established all kinds of codes of behavior, taboos, and shared rituals. They also created myths in which their tribe was considered to be the favorite of the gods, chosen for some great purpose. To be a member of the tribe was to be cleansed by rituals and to be favored by the gods. Those who belonged to other groups had unfamiliar rituals and belief systems, their own gods and origin myths. They were not clean. They represented the other, something dark, threatening, and a challenge to the tribe's sense of superiority. This was part of our psychological makeup for thousands upon thousands of years. It transformed itself into a great fear of other cultures and ways of thinking. For Christians, this meant all heathens. And despite millennia of civilization, it lives on within us to this day, in the form of a mental process in which we divide the world into what is familiar and unfamiliar, clean and unclean. We develop certain ideas and values. We socialize with those who share those values, who form part of our inner circle, our clique. We form factions of rigid beliefs on the right, on the left, for this or for that. We live in our heads with the same thoughts and ideas over and over, cocooned from the outside world. When we are confronted with people or individuals who have different values and belief systems, we feel threatened. Our first move is not to understand them, but to demonize them, that shadowy other. Alternatively, we may choose to look at them through the prism of our own values and assume they share them. We mentally convert the other into something familiar. They may come from a completely different culture, but after all, they must want the same things we do. This is a failure of our minds to move outward and understand, to be sensitive to nuance. Everything must be white or black, clean or unclean. Understand, the opposite approach is the way to power in this world. It begins with a fundamental fearlessness. You do not feel afraid or affronted by people who have different ways of thinking or acting. You do not feel superior to those on the outside. In fact, you are excited by such diversity. Your first move is to open up your spirit to these differences, to understand what makes the other tick, to gain a feel for people's inner lives, how they see the world. In this way, you continually expose yourself to wider and wider circles of people, building connections to these various networks. The source of your power is your sensitivity and closeness to this social environment. You can detect trends and changes in people's tastes well before anyone else. In the hood, conditions are more crowded than elsewhere. People with all kinds of different psychologies are constantly in your face. Any power you have depends on your ability to know everything that is going on around you, to be sensitive to changes, aware of the power structures that are imposed from without and within. There is no time or room to escape to some inner dreamland. You have a sense of urgency to stay connected to the environment and the people around you. Your life depends on it. We now live in similar conditions. All kinds of people of divergent cultures and psychologies are thrown together. But because we live in a society of more apparent abundance and ease, we lack that sense of urgency to connect to other people. This is dangerous. In such a melting pot as the modern world, with people's tastes changing at a faster pace than ever before, our success depends on our ability to move outside ourselves and connect to other social networks. At all costs, you need to continually force yourself outward. You must reach a point where any sense of losing this connection to your environment translates into a feeling of vulnerability and peril. In the end, this primal fear of ours translates into a mental infirmity, the closing of the mind to any ideas that are new and unfamiliar. The fearless types in history learn to develop the opposite. An open spirit, a mind that is constantly learning from experience. Look at the example of the great British primatologist Jane Goodall, whose field research revolutionized our ideas on chimpanzees and primates. Prior to Goodall's work, scientists had established certain accepted ideas on how to do research on animals such as chimpanzees. They were mostly to be studied in cages under very controlled circumstances. On occasion, primatologists would research them in the wild. They would come up with various tricks to lure the chimpanzees closer to them, while remaining hidden behind some kind of protective screen. They would conduct experiments by manipulating the animals and noting their responses. The goal was to come up with general truths about chimpanzee behavior. Only by keeping their distance from the animals could the scientists study them. Goodall did not have any formal training in the sciences when she arrived in 1960 in what is now known as Tanzania to study chimpanzees in the wild. Operating totally on her own, she devised a radically different means of research. The chimps lived in the remotest parts of the country and were notoriously shy. She tracked them from a distance, patiently working to gain their trust. She dressed inconspicuously and was careful to not look them in the eye. When she noticed they were uncomfortable with her being in the area, she moved away or acted like a baboon that was merely there digging for insects. Slowly, over the course of several months, she was able to move closer and closer. Now she could begin to identify individual chimps that she kept seeing. She gave them names, something scientists had never done before. They had always been designated by numbers. With these names, she could begin to detect subtle nuances in their individual behavior. They had different personalities, like humans. After nearly a year of this patient seduction, the chimps began to relax in her presence and allow her to interact with them, something no one had ever achieved before in the history of studying primates in the wild. This took a tremendous degree of courage, as chimpanzees were considered the most volatile of the primates, more dangerous and violent than gorillas. As she interacted with them more and more, she noticed a change in herself as well. "I think my mind works like a chimp's, subconsciously," she wrote a friend. She felt this because she had developed an uncanny ability to find them in the forest. Now, gaining access to them, she took note of several phenomena that belied the accepted data on chimpanzee behavior. Scientists had cataloged the animals as vegetarians. She observed them hunting and eating monkeys. Only humans were considered capable of making and using tools. She saw them crafting elaborate instruments to catch insects for food. She saw them engage in bizarre dance rituals during a rainstorm. She later observed a horrific war that went on for 4 years between rival packs. She cataloged some rather strange Machiavellian behavior among the males who fought for supremacy. All in all, she revealed a degree of variety in their emotional and intellectual lives that altered the concept not only of chimpanzees but also of all primates and mammals. This has great application beyond the realms of science. Normally, when you study something, you begin with certain preconceived notions about the subject. Because scientists had come to believe that chimpanzees had a limited range of behavior, that is all that they saw, missing the much more complex reality. Your mind begins the process in a closed state, not really sensitive to difference and nuance. You are afraid of having your assumptions challenged. Instead, like Goodall, you must let go of this need to control and narrow your field of vision. When you study an individual or a group, your goal is to get inside their minds, their experiences, their way of looking at things. To do this, you must interact with them on a more equal plane. With this open and fearless spirit, you will discover things no one had suspected before. you will have a much deeper appreciation for the targets of your actions or the public you are trying to reach. And with such understanding will come the power to move them. Keys to fearlessness. Few people have the wisdom to prefer the criticism that would do them good to the praise that deceives them. François de la Rochefoucauld. In the work that we produce for business or for culture, there is always a telling moment when it leaves our hands and reaches the public for which it was intended. In that instant, it ceases to be something that was in our heads. It becomes an object that is judged by others. Sometimes this object connects with people in a profound way. It strikes an emotional chord, resonates, and has warmth. It meets a need. Other times it leaves people surprisingly cold. In our minds, we had imagined it having a much different effect. This process can seem rather mysterious. Some people seem to have a knack for creating things that resonate with an audience. They are great artists, politicians with the popular touch, or business people who are endlessly inventive. Sometimes we ourselves produce something that works, but we fail to understand why, and lacking this knowledge, we cannot reproduce our success. There is an aspect to this phenomenon, however, that is explicable. Anything we create or produce is for a public large or small, depending on what we do. If we are the type that lives mostly in our heads, imagining what the intended public will like, or not even caring, this spirit is reproduced in the work itself. It is disconnected from the social environment. It is a product of a person who is wrapped up in him or herself. If, on the other hand, we are deeply connected to the public, if we have a profound sense of their needs and wants, then what we make tends to resonate. We have internalized the way of thinking and feeling of our audience, and it shows in the work. The great Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky had almost two separate parts to his career. In the first, he was a socialist who interacted mostly with other intellectuals. His novels and stories were relatively successful. But then, in 1849, he was sentenced to several years of prison and hard labor in Siberia for ostensibly conspiring against the government. There, he suddenly discovered that he hadn't known the Russian people at all. In prison, he was thrown in among the dregs of society. In the small village where he did his hard labor, he finally mingled with the Russian peasantry that dominated the country. Once he was freed, all of these experiences became deeply embedded in his work, and suddenly his novels resonated far beyond intellectual circles. He understood his public, the mass of Russian people, from the inside, and his work became immensely popular. Understand, you cannot disguise your attitude towards the public. If you feel superior at all, part of some chosen elite, then this seeps out in the work. It is conveyed in the tone and mood. It feels patronizing. If you have little access to the public you are trying to reach, but you feel that the ideas in your head cannot fail to be interesting, then it almost inevitably comes across as something too personal, the product of someone who is alienated. In either case, what is really dominating the spirit of your work is fear. To interact closely with the public and get its feedback might mean having to adjust your brilliant ideas, your preconceived notions. This might challenge your tidy vision of the world. You might disguise this with a snobbish veneer, but it is the age-old fear of the other. We are social creatures who make things in order to communicate and connect with those around us. Your goal must be to break down the distance between you and your audience, the base of your support in life. Some of this distance is mental. It comes from your ego and the need to feel superior. Some of it is physical. The nature of your business tends to shut you off from the public with layers of bureaucracy. In any event, what you are seeking is maximum interaction, allowing you to get a feel for people from the inside. You come to thrive off their feedback and criticism. Operating this way, what you produce will not fail to resonate because it will come from the inside. This deep level of interaction is the source of the most powerful and popular works in culture and business, and a political style that truly connects. The following are 4 strategies you can use to bring yourself closer to this ideal. Crush all distance. The French artist Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec came from one of the oldest aristocratic bloodlines in France, but from early on he felt estranged from his family. Part of this came from his physical handicap. His legs had stopped growing at the age of 14, giving him a dwarfish appearance. Part of it came from his sensitive nature. He turned to painting as his only interest in life, and in 1882, at the age of 18, he moved to Paris to study with a famous artist whose studio was in Montmartre, the bohemian and somewhat seedy part of the city. There, Toulouse-Lautrec discovered a whole new world. The cafes and dance halls frequented by prostitutes, con artists, dancers, street performers, and all the shady characters who found themselves drawn to this quartier. Perhaps because of his own alienation from his family, he identified with these outcasts. And slowly he began to immerse himself deeper and deeper in the social life of Montmartre. He befriended the prostitutes and hired them as models, seeking to capture the essence of their lives on canvas. He returned to the dance halls often and sketched while he watched. He drank with the criminal types and the anarchist agitators who passed through the neighborhood. He absorbed every aspect of this world, including the habits of the rich people who came to the area for entertainment and to slum it. Other painters like Degas and Renoir, who both lived in Montmartre, painted many scenes of life there, but it was always with a sense of distance, as if they were outsiders peeking in. Toulouse-Lautrec was more of an active participant, and as his drawings and paintings began to reflect this immersion, his work drew more attention from the public. All of this culminated in the posters that he did for the dance hall the Moulin Rouge, which opened in 1889. The first and most famous one of all was a scandalous image of a dancer kicking so high you can see her underwear. The colors are intense and garish. But strangest of all is the kind of flat space he created, which gives viewers the sensation that they are there on stage with the performers, in the middle of all the activity and bright lights. No one had created anything quite like it before. When the poster was placed all over the city, people were mesmerized by the image. It seemed to vibrate with a life of its own. More and more posters followed of all the figures in the Moulin Rouge whom he came to know on intimate terms, and an entire new aesthetic was forged around his complete, democratic mingling with his subjects. His work became immensely popular. Understand, in this day and age, to reach people you must have access to their inner lives, their frustrations, aspirations, resentments. To do so, you must crush as much distance as possible between you and your audience. You enter their spirit and absorb it from within. Their way of looking at things becomes yours, and when you recreate it in some form of work, it has life. What shocks and excites you will then have the same effect on them. This requires a degree of fearlessness and an open spirit. You are not afraid to have your whole personality shaped by these intense interactions. You assume a radical equality with the public, giving voice to people's ideas and desires. What you produce will naturally connect in a deep way. Open informal channels of criticism and feedback. When Eleanor Roosevelt entered the White House as the First Lady in 1933, it was with much trepidation. She had a disdain for conventional politics and for the kind of cliquish attitude it fostered. In her mind, her husband's power would depend on his connection to the people who had elected him. To get out of the depression, the public had to feel engaged in the struggle, not merely be seduced by speeches and programs. When people feel involved, they bring their own ideas and energy to the cause. Her fear was that the bureaucratic nature of government would swallow up her husband. He would come to listen to his cabinet members and experts. His contact with the public would be relegated to formal channels such as reports, polls, and studies. This isolation would spell his doom, cutting him off from his base of support. Denied an official position within the administration, she decided to work to create informal channels to the public on her own. She traveled all over the country, to inner cities and remote rural towns, listening to people's complaints and needs. She brought many of these people back to meet the president to give him first-hand impressions of the effects of the New Deal. She started a column in the Woman's Home Companion, in which she had posted above the headline, "I want you to write me." She would use her column as a kind of discussion forum with the American public, encouraging people to share their criticisms. Within 6 months, she had received over 300,000 letters, and with her staff, she worked to answer every last one of them. She opened other channels of communication, for instance, planting her aides in various New Deal programs who would then poll on her behalf the public affected by these programs. With this system in place, she began to see a pattern from the bottom up, a growing disenchantment with the New Deal. Every day, she left a memo in her husband's basket, reminding him of these criticisms and the need to be more responsive. And slowly she began to have an influence on his policy, pushing him leftward, for instance, getting him to create programs such as the NYA, the National Youth Administration, which would involve young people actively in the New Deal. Over time, she became the unofficial channel of communication for women's groups and African Americans, shoring up FDR's support in these two key constituencies. All of this work took tremendous courage, for she was continually ridiculed for her activist approach. long before any First Lady had ever thought of taking such a role. And her work played a major part in FDR's ability to maintain his image as a man of the people. As Eleanor understood, any kind of group tends to close itself off from the outside world. It is easier to operate this way. From within this bubble, people will delude themselves into thinking they have insight into how their audience or public feels. They read the papers, various reports, the poll numbers, etc. But all of this information tends to be flat and highly filtered. It is much different when you interact directly with the public and hear in the flesh their criticisms and feedback. You discover what lies at the root of their discontent, the various nuances of how your work affects them. Their problems come to life, and any solutions you come up with have more relevance. You create a back-and-forth dynamic in which their ideas, involvement, and energy can be harnessed for your purposes. If some distance between you and the public must be maintained by the nature of your group or enterprise, then the ideal is to open up as many informal channels as possible, getting your feedback straight from the source. Reconnect with your base. We see the following occur over and over. A person has success when they are younger because they have deep ties with a social group. What they produce and say comes from a real place and connects with an audience. Then slowly they lose this connection. Success creates distance. They come to spend most of their time with other successful people. Consciously or unconsciously, they come to feel separated and above their audience. The intensity in their work is gone, and with it, any kind of real effect on the public. In his own way, the famous black activist Malcolm X struggled with this problem. He had spent his youth as a savvy street hustler, ending up in prison on drug charges. There, he discovered the religion of Islam, as practiced by the Nation of Islam, and immediately converted. Out of prison, he became a highly visible spokesperson for the group. Eventually, he broke off from the Nation of Islam and transformed himself into a leading figure in the growing Black Power movement of the 1960s. In these various phases of his life, Malcolm felt intense anger and frustration at the levels of injustice for African Americans, much of which he had experienced firsthand. He channeled these emotions into powerful speeches, seeming to give voice to the anger that many felt who lived deep within the ghettos of America. But as he became more and more famous, he felt some anxiety. Other leaders in the black community that he had known had begun to live fairly well. They could not help but feel some distance and superiority to those they were supposed to represent, like a father caring for a child. Malcolm hated that feeling of creeping paternalism. In his mind, people can only help themselves. His role was to inspire them to action, not act in their name. To inoculate himself against this psychic distance, he increased his interactions with street hustlers and agitators, the kind of people from the lower depths that most leaders would scrupulously avoid. Those from the heart of the ghetto were his power base, and he had to reconnect with them. He made himself spend more time with those who had suffered recent injustices, soaking up their experiences and sense of outrage. Most people mellow with age. He would retain his anger, the intensity of emotions that had impelled him in the first place and given him his charisma. The goal in connecting to the public is not to please everyone or to spread yourself out to the widest possible audience. Communication is a power of intensity, not extensity and numbers. In trying to widen your appeal, you will substitute quantity for quality, and you will pay a price. You have a base of power, a group of people, small or large, which identifies with you. This base is also mental ideas you had when you were younger, which were tied to powerful emotions and inspired you to take a particular path. Time and success tend to diffuse the sense of connection you have to this physical and mental base. You will drift, and your powers of communication will diminish. Know your base and work to reconnect with it. Keep your associations with it alive, intense, and present. Return to your origins, the source of all inspiration and power. Create the social mirror. Alone, in our minds, we can imagine we have all kinds of powers and abilities. Our egos can inflate to any size. But when we produce something that fails to have the expected impact, we are suddenly faced with a limit. We are not as brilliant or skilled as we had imagined. In such a case, our tendency is to blame others for not understanding it or getting in our way. Our egos are bruised and delicate. Criticism from the outside seems like a personal attack, which we cannot endure. We tend to close ourselves off, and this makes it doubly difficult to succeed with our next venture. Instead of turning inward, consider people's coolness to your idea and their criticisms as a kind of mirror they are holding up to you. A physical mirror turns you into an object. You can see yourself as others see you. Your ego cannot protect you, the mirror does not lie. You use it to correct your appearance and avoid ridicule. The opinions of other people serve a similar function. You view your work from inside your mind, encrusted with all kinds of desires and fears. They see it as an object. They see it as it is. Through their criticisms, you can get closer to this objective version and gradually improve what you do. One caveat: beware of feedback from friends whose judgments could be tainted by feelings of envy or the need to flatter. When your work does not communicate with others, consider it your own fault. You did not make your ideas clear enough and you failed to connect with your audience emotionally. This will spare you any bitterness or anger that might come from people's critiques. You are simply perfecting your work through the social mirror. Reversal of perspective. Science and the scientific method are very powerful and practical pursuits of knowledge that have come to dominate much of our thinking for the past few centuries. But they have also spawned a peculiar preconception that to understand anything we must study it from a distance and with a detached perspective. For example, we tend to judge a book that is full of statistics and quotes from various studies as carrying more weight because it seems to have that requisite scientific objectivity and distance. Science, however, often deals with matter that is inorganic or has a marginal emotional life. Studying such things from a detached perspective makes sense and yields profound results. But this does not translate so well when dealing with people and creatures who respond from an emotional core. The knowledge of what makes them tick on the inside is missing. To study them from the outside is merely a prejudice, often one stemming from fear. Dealing with people's experiences and subjectivity is messy and chaotic. Distance is cleaner and easier. It is time to reevaluate this preconception and see things from the opposite perspective. Knowledge of human nature and social factors, the kind that is often most valuable to us, depends on knowing people and networks from the inside, on getting a feel for what they are experiencing. This can best be gained by an intense involvement and participation, as opposed to the pseudoscientific pose of the intellectual addicted to studies, citations, and numbers, all designed to back up their preconceptions. This other form of knowledge, from the inside, must be the one that you come to esteem above all others in social matters. It is what will give you power to affect people. To the extent that you feel yourself to be distant and on the outside, you must tell yourself you do not understand what you are studying or trying to reach. You are missing the mark and there is work to be done. A really intelligent man feels what other men only know. Baron de Montesquieu, Chapter 8. Respect the process, mastery. The fools in life want things fast and easy money. Success. Attention. Boredom is their great enemy and fear. Whatever they manage to get slips through their hands as fast as it comes in. You, on the other hand, want to outlast your rivals. You are building the foundation for something that can continue to expand. To make this happen, you will have to serve an apprenticeship. You must learn early on to endure the hours of practice and drudgery, knowing that in the end all of that time will translate into a higher pleasure. Mastery of a craft and of yourself. Your goal is to reach the ultimate skill level, an intuitive feel for what must come next. Slow money. Master the instrument. Master the music. Then forget all that shit and play. Charlie Parker. Growing up in Southside Queens, the only people Curtis Jackson could see who had any money and power were the street hustlers. So at the age of 11 and with big dreams for the future, he chose just such a path for himself. Almost immediately, however, he saw that the life of a hustler was not glamorous at all. It consisted mostly of standing on a street corner day after day, selling the same stuff to the same fiends. It meant enduring hours with nothing to do, waiting for customers to come by, often in the bitter cold or the blistering heat. And in those long, tedious hours on the streets, Curtis's mind naturally would wander. He would find himself wishing for money that would come faster and easier, with more excitement. There were opportunities for this in the hood. They mostly involved crime or some dubious scheme. Sometimes he would feel tempted to try them, but in such moments he would remind himself of the endless stories of the hustlers he had known who had fallen for the illusion of fast, easy money. All suckers who inevitably ended up dead or broke. There was his friend TC who got tired of hustling and fell in with a crew that would spend the summer robbing convenience stores and occasionally a bank. He made quite a haul of money over those 3 months and then blew it all over the fall and winter. The following summer, he was back at it again. It wasn't just the money. It was the thrill that came in flirting with so much danger. But that second summer, his luck ran out and he was killed in a gunfight with the police. There was Curtis's colleague Spite, a few years older, who had managed to save some money from his hustling but had dreams of something much bigger. He convinced himself he could make a fortune fast by buying a piece of a franchise business that was new to the hood, but that he felt was certain to be hot. He poured all of his money into the venture, but he was too impatient. He had not taken the time to accustom the public to his new life. Everyone believed the business was just a front for some drug operation. They avoided it, and it soon became a hangout for hustlers and fiends. It failed within a few months, and he never recovered from the experience. This was the gist of the problem. To be a successful hustler, you had to accustom yourself to the slow, grinding pace of the job. But in the hood, the future rarely seemed promising. It was hard for hustlers to imagine saving their money for some rainy day in the future when that day would probably never come. Inevitably, the desire for something faster would creep into their blood. And if they gave in, they created a cycle they could never escape. If they were able to get some fast money, it would act like a drug. They would get excited and spend it all on items to impress people. With no money left, they would return to dealing drugs, but now it seemed too slow and boring. They would try again for something fast. They became trapped by their own greed, and as the years went by, they would fail to develop any kind of patience or discipline. They could not manage this up and down pace for too long. By the age of 25 or 30, they would burn themselves out and have no skills or money to show for their years of work. Their fate after that was generally unpleasant. To resist this temptation, Curtis decided he would force himself in the opposite direction. He treated hustling as a job. He showed up on the street corner at the same hour every day, working from dawn to dusk. Gradually, he accustomed himself to this slow pace. During the long hours with nothing to do, he would contemplate the future and come up with detailed plans of what he would accomplish year by year, ending with his eventual escape from street hustling. He would move into music and then into business. To take the first step, he would have to save his money. The thought of this goal helped him endure the daily tedium of the job. In these slow hours, he also devised new hustling schemes, with the idea of continually improving himself at this job. He took up boxing to discipline his mind and body. He was terrible at first, but he was tenacious, training day in and day out, eventually becoming a skilled fighter. This taught him invaluable lessons. He could get whatever he wanted through sheer persistence rather than by violence or force. Progressing step by step was the only way to succeed in anything. By the age of 20, he made his break into music, all according to his original plan. In 1999, after a few years of apprenticing with Jam Master Jay, Curtis, now known as 50 Cent, signed a deal with Columbia Records. It seemed like a dream come true, but as he looked around at the other rappers who had been at the label a little longer, he saw the dangers around him had only increased. The tendency, as he saw it, was to immediately let up in your energy and focus. Rappers would feel that they had arrived, and unconsciously they wouldn't work as hard and would spend less time learning their craft. That sudden influx of money would go to their heads. They would imagine they had the golden touch and could keep it coming. One hit song or record would make this even worse. Not building something slowly, a career, a future, it would all fall apart within a few years, as younger and more eager rappers would take their place. Their life would be all the more miserable for having once tasted some glory. To Curtis, the solution was simple. This was a new world he had entered. He had to take his time and learn it well. In the fast environment of hip-hop, he would slow everything down. He avoided the partying and kept mostly to himself. He decided to treat Columbia Records as a university, his one chance to educate himself in the business. He would record his music at night and spend the entire day at the Columbia offices, talking shop to people in every division. Gradually, he taught himself more and more about marketing and distribution and the nuts and bolts of the business. He studied all aspects of production, what went into making a hit song. He practiced his music over and over. When the label sent him and dozens of other rappers to a retreat in upstate New York to write songs, he returned with 36 tracks, while most of the others could barely muster 5 or 6. In the wake of the assassination attempt on 50 in 2000, Columbia Records dropped him from the label, but by then he had outgrown his need for their expertise. He had accumulated so much knowledge and skill that he was able to apply it all to his mixtape campaign, creating songs at an insane pace and marketing his music as smartly as any professional. Step by step he advanced, the campaign gaining the attention of Eminem, who signed him to his label at Interscope in 2003. Years later, he found himself in the corporate world. and he quickly discovered it was not much different from the streets. So many of the business people and executives he met had that same level of impatience. They could only think in terms of months or weeks. Their relationship to money was emotional, a way to impose their importance and feed their ego. They would come to him with schemes that seemed intriguing in the present but that led nowhere down the road. They were not attuned to the immense changes going on in the world and, planning to exploit them in the future, that would take too much effort and time. These business types came at him from all directions with endorsement deals that would make him some fast millions. They assumed he was like all the other rappers who grabbed at such opportunities. But endorsement deals would not help him build anything solid or real. It was illusion money. He would turn them down, opting to start his own businesses on his own terms, each business building on the other like links on a chain. The goal this time was simple: to forge an empire that would last. And as before, he would get there through his own grinding persistence. The fearless approach. Most people can't handle boredom. That means they can't stay on one thing until they get good at it. And they wonder why they're unhappy. 50 Cent. For our most primitive ancestors, life was a constant struggle, entailing endless labor to secure food and shelter. If there was any free time, it generally was reserved for rituals that would give meaning to such a hard life. Then, over thousands of years of civilization, life gradually became easier for many, and with that came more and more free time. In such moments, there was no need to work the fields or worry about enemies or the elements, just an expanse of hours to somehow fill. And suddenly a new emotion was born into this world: boredom. At work or in rituals, the mind would be filled with various tasks to accomplish. But alone in one's house, this free time would allow the mind to roam wherever it wanted. Confronted with such freedom, the mind has a tendency to gravitate towards anxieties about the future, possible problems and dangers. Such empty time faintly echoes the eternal emptiness of death itself. And so with this new emotion that assailed our ancestors came a desire that haunts us to this day, to escape boredom at all cost, to distract ourselves from these anxieties. The principal means of distraction are all forms of public entertainment, drugs and alcohol and social activities. But such distractions have a drug-like effect. They wear off. We crave new ones, faster ones, to lift us out of ourselves and divert us from the harsh realities of life and creeping boredom. An entire civilization, ancient Rome, practically collapsed under the weight of this new need and emotion. Their economy became tied to the creation of novel luxuries and entertainments that sapped its citizens' spirit. Few were willing anymore to sacrifice their pleasures for hard work or the public good. This is the pattern that boredom has created for the human animal ever since. We look outside ourselves for diversions and grow dependent on them. These entertainments have a faster pace than the time we spend at work. Work then is experienced as something boring, slow, and repetitive. Anything challenging, requiring effort, is viewed the same way. It's not fun. It's not fast. If we go far enough in this direction, we find it increasingly difficult to muster the patience to endure the hard work that is required for mastering any kind of craft. It becomes harder to spend time alone. Life becomes divided between what is necessary, time at work, and what is pleasurable, distractions and entertainment. In the past, these extremes of boredom assailed mostly those in the upper classes. Now it is something that plagues almost all of us. There is, however, another possible relationship to boredom and empty time, a fearless one that yields much different results than frustration and escapism. It goes as follows. You have some large goal that you wish to achieve in your life, something you feel that you are destined to create. If you reach that goal, it will bring you far greater satisfaction than the evanescent thrills that come from outside diversions. To get there, you will have to learn a craft, educate yourself, and develop the proper skills. All human activities involve a process of mastery. You must learn the various steps and procedures involved, proceeding to higher and higher levels of proficiency. This requires discipline and tenacity, the ability to withstand repetitive activity, slowness, and the anxiety that comes with such a challenge. Once you start down this path, two things will happen. First, having the larger goal will lift your mind out of the moment and help you endure the hard work and drudgery. Second, as you become better at this task or craft, it becomes increasingly pleasurable. You see your improvement. You see connections and possibilities you hadn't noticed before. Your mind becomes absorbed in mastering it further, and in this absorption you forget all your problems. fears for the future, or people's nasty games. But unlike the diversion that comes from outside sources, this one comes from within. You are developing a lifelong skill, the kind of mental discipline that will serve as the foundation of your power. To make this work, you must choose a career or a craft that excites you in some deep way. You are creating no dividing line between work and pleasure. Your pleasure comes in mastering the process itself and in the mental immersion it requires. In the hood, most of the jobs that are available offer low money and the kind of menial work that leads to no real skills. Even hustling is tedious and not really a path with a future. In the face of this reality, people can go in one of two directions. They can seek to escape this reality through drugs, alcohol, gang activity, or whatever immediate pleasures can be had. Or they can get out of the cycle by developing an intense work ethic and discipline. The types who go in the latter direction have a deep hunger for power and a sense of urgency. Nipping at their heels at all times is the possibility of a life of crap jobs or dangerous distractions. They teach themselves to be patient and to practice something. They have learned from early on, through their jobs or through hustling, to endure the long, boring stretches of time that are necessary to master a process. They do not whine or seek to escape this reality, but instead see it as a means to freedom. For those of us who do not grow up in such an environment, we do not feel this urgent connection between discipline and power. Our jobs are not so dull. Someday they may lead to something really good, or so we think. We have developed some discipline at school or on the job, and it's enough. But we are, in fact, deluding ourselves. More often than not, our jobs are something that we endure. We live for our time off and dream of the future. We are not engaged in the daily activity of the job with our full mental powers because it is not as exciting as life outside work. We develop less and less tolerance for dull moments and repetitive activity. If we happen to lose our job or want something else, we suddenly have to confront the fact that we do not have the requisite patience to make the proper change. Before it is too late, we must wake up and realize that real power and success can come only through mastering a process, which in turn depends on a foundation of discipline that we are constantly keeping sharp. The fearless types in history inevitably display in their lives a higher tolerance than most of us for repetitive, boring tasks. This allows them to excel in their field and master their craft. Part of this comes from seeing early on in life the tangible results that come from such rigorousness and patience. In this vein, the story of Isaac Newton is particularly illuminating. In early 1665, he was a 23-year-old student at Cambridge University, on the verge of taking his exams to be a scholar in mathematics, when suddenly the plague broke out in London. The deaths were horrific and multiplied by the day. Many Londoners fled to the countryside where they spread the plague far and wide. By that summer, Cambridge was forced to close, and its students dispersed in all directions for their safety. For these students, nothing could have been worse. They were forced to live in scattered villages and experienced intense fear and isolation for the next 20 months, as the plague raged throughout England. Their active minds had nothing to seize upon, and many went mad with boredom. For Newton, however, the plague months represented something entirely different. He returned to his mother's home in Woolsthorpe, Lincolnshire. At Cambridge, he had been bothered by a series of mathematical problems that tortured not only him but his professors as well. He decided he would spend the time in Woolsthorpe working over such problems. He had carried with him a large number of books on mathematics that he had accumulated, and he proceeded to study them in intense detail. He went over the same problems, day after day, filling notebooks with endless calculations. When the sky was clear, he would wander outside and continue these musings, seated in the apple orchards surrounding the house. He would look up at an apple dangling on a branch, the same size to his eye as the moon above, and he would ponder the relationship between the two, what held the one on the tree and the other within the Earth's orbit, leading him to ideas about gravity. Staring at the sun and its optical effect on everything around him, he began to conduct his own experiments on the movement and properties of light itself. His mind flowed naturally from problems of geometry to how it all related to motion and mechanics. The deeper he went into these studies, the more he would see connections and have sudden insights. He solved problem after problem, his enthusiasm and momentum quickening as he realized the powers he was unleashing in himself. While the others were paralyzed with fear and boredom, he passed the entire 20 months without a thought of the plague or any worries for the future. And in that time, he essentially created modern mathematics, mechanics, and optics, It is generally considered the most prolific, concentrated period of scientific thinking in the history of mankind. Of course, Isaac Newton possessed a rare mind, but at Cambridge nobody had suspected him of such mental powers. It took this period of forced isolation and repetitive labor to transform him into a genius. When we look at those who stand out in history, we tend to focus on their achievements. From such an angle, it is easy for us to be dazzled and see their success as stemming from genetics and perhaps some social factors. They are gifted. We could never reach their level, or so we think. But we are choosing to ignore that telling period in their lives, when each and every one of them underwent a rather tedious apprenticeship in their field. What kept them going was the power they quickly discovered through mastery of certain steps. Sudden insights came to them that seem like genius to us, but are actually part of any intense learning process. If only we were to study that part of their lives as opposed to the legends they later became, we would understand that we too could have some or all of that power by a patient immersion in any field of study. Many people cannot handle the boredom this might entail. They fear starting out on such an arduous process. They prefer their distractions, dreams, and illusions, never aware of the higher pleasures that are there for those who choose to master themselves and a craft. Keys to fearlessness. All of man's troubles come from not knowing how to sit still, alone in a room. Blaise Pascal. As children learning language, we all undergo the same process. At first, we experience a level of frustration. We have desires and needs we wish to express, but we lack the words. Slowly, we pick up phrases and absorb patterns of speech. We accumulate vocabulary, word by word. Some of this is tedious, but we are impelled by our intense curiosity and hunger for knowledge. At a certain point, we attain a level of fluency in which we can communicate as fast as we think. Soon, we don't have to think at all, words come naturally. And at times when we are inspired, they flow out of us in ways we cannot even explain. Learning a language, our own or a foreign one, involves a process that cannot be avoided. There are no shortcuts. Learning language sets the pattern for all human activities, purely intellectual or physical. To master a musical instrument or a game, we begin at the lowest level of competence. The game seems boring as we have to learn the rules and play on a simple level. As with learning language, we feel frustrated. We see others play well and we imagine how that could feel, but we are locked in this mode of tedious practice and repetition. At such a point, we either give in to our frustration and give up the process, or we proceed, intuiting the power that lies just around the corner. Slowly, our ability rises and the frustration lowers. We don't need to think so much. We are surprised by our fluency and connections that come to us in a flash. Once we reach a certain level of mastery, we see there are higher levels and challenges. If we are disciplined and patient, we proceed. At each higher level, new pleasures and insights await us. Ones not even suspected when we started out. We can take this as far as we want. In any human activity, there is always a higher level to which we can aspire. For thousands of years, this concept of learning was an elemental part of practical wisdom. It was embedded in the concept of mastering a craft. Human survival depended on the construction of instruments, buildings, ships, and more. To build them well, a person had to learn the craft, spending years as an apprentice, advancing step by step. With the advent of the printing press and books that could be distributed widely, this discipline and patience was then applied to education, to formally gaining knowledge. Those who posed as people who possessed learning, without the years of accumulating knowledge, were thought of as charlatans and quacks, to be despised. Today, however, we have reached a dangerous point in which this elemental wisdom is being forgotten. Much of this is due to the destructive side of technology. We all understand its immense benefits and the power it has brought us. But with the intense speed and ease with which we can get what we want, a new pattern of thinking has evolved. We are by nature creatures of impatience. It has always been hard for us to want something and not have the capacity to get it. The increased speed from technology accentuates this childish aspect of our character. The slow accumulation of knowledge seems unnecessarily boring. Learning should be fun, fast, and easy. On the internet, we can make instant connections, skimming along the surface from one subject to the next. We come to value breadth of knowledge over depth, the power to move here or there rather than digging deeper to the source of a problem and finding out how things tick. We lose a sense of process. In such an atmosphere, charlatans sprout like weeds. They offer the age-old myth of the quick transformation, the shortcut to power, beauty, and success. In the form of books, CDs, seminars, ancient secrets brought back to life. And they find many suckers on which to prey. This new pattern of thinking and learning is not progress. It creates a phenomenon that we shall call the short circuit. To reach the end of anything, to master a process, requires time, focus, and energy. When people are so distracted, their minds constantly moving from one thing to another, it becomes increasingly difficult to maintain concentration on one thing for a few hours, let alone for months and years. Under this influence, the mind will tend to short circuit. It will not be able to go all the way to the end of a task. It will want to move on to something else that seems more enticing. It becomes hard to make things well when the focus is broken, which is why we find a gradual increase in products that are shoddy, made with less and less attention to detail. Understand, the real secret, the real formula for power in this world, lies in accepting the ugly reality that learning requires a process, and this in turn demands patience and the ability to endure drudge work. It is not sexy or seductive at first glance, but this truth is based on something real and substantial, an age-old wisdom that will never be overturned. The key is the level of your desire. If you are really after power and mastery, then you will absorb this idea deeply and engrave it in your mind. There are no shortcuts. You will distrust anything that is fast and easy. You will be able to endure the initial months of dull, repetitive labor because you have an overall goal. This will prevent you from short-circuiting, knowing many things but mastering none of them. In the end, what you really will be doing is mastering yourself, your impatience, your fear of boredom and empty time, your need for constant fun and amusement. The following are 5 principal strategies for developing the proper relationship to process. Progress through trial and error. Based on his street fighting as a teenager, Jack Johnson had the feeling that he could someday become a great boxer. But he was black and poor, too poor to afford a trainer. And so in 1896, at the age of 18, he began a rather remarkable process. He looked for any conceivable fight he could have in the ring with any kind of opponent. In the beginning, he suffered some terrible beatings from boxers who used him as sparring material. But since this was his only form of education, he quickly learned to become as evasive as possible, to prolong the fight so he could learn. At the time, fights could go a full 20 rounds, and Johnson's goal was always to drag them out to the maximum. In that time, he would carefully study his opponents. He observed how some types would move in familiar patterns and how others would telegraph their punches. He could categorize them by the look in their eye and their body language. He learned to provoke some into a rage so he could study their reactions. Others he lulled to sleep with a calm style to see the effects of this as well. Johnson's method was quite painful. It meant 15 to 20 bouts a year. He suffered innumerable hard blows. Even though he could knock out most of his opponents, he preferred to be evasive and learn on the job. This meant hearing endless taunts from the mostly white audiences that he was a coward. Slowly, however, it began to pay off. He faced such a variety of foes that he became adept at recognizing their particular style the instant the fight began. He could sense their weaknesses and when exactly he should move in for the kill. He accustomed himself mentally and physically to the pace of a long, grueling bout. He gained an intuitive feel for the space of the boxing ring itself and how to maneuver and exhaust his opponents over the course of 20 rounds. Many of them later confessed that he seemed to have the ability to read their minds. He was always a step ahead. Following this path, within a few short years, Johnson transformed himself into the heavyweight champion of the world and the greatest fighter of his era. Too often our concept of learning is to absorb ideas from books, to do what others tell us to, and perhaps to do some controlled exercises. But this is an incomplete and fearful concept of learning, cut off from practical experience. We are creatures who make things. We don't simply imagine them. To master any process, you must learn through trial and error. You experiment, you take some hard blows, and you see what works and doesn't work in real time. You expose yourself and your work to public scrutiny. Your failures are embedded in your nervous system. You do not want to repeat them. Your successes are tied to immediate experience and teach you more. You come to respect the process in a deep way because you see and feel the progress you can make through practice and steady labor. Taken far enough, you gain a fingertip feel for what needs to be done because your knowledge is tied to something physical and visceral. And having such intuition is the ultimate point of mastery. Master something simple. Often we have a general feeling of insecurity because we have never really mastered anything in life. Unconsciously, we feel weak and never quite up to the task. Before we begin something, we sense we will fail. The best way to overcome this once and for all is to attack this weakness head-on and build for ourselves a pattern of confidence. And this must be done by first tackling something simple and basic, giving us a taste for the power we can have. Demosthenes, one of the greatest political figures in ancient Athens, followed such a path, determined to overcome his intense fear of public speaking. As a child, he was frail and nervous. He talked with a stammer and always seemed out of breath. He was constantly ridiculed. His father had died when he was young, leaving him a nice sum of money, but his guardians quickly stole all of it. He decided to become a lawyer and eventually take the perpetrators to court on his own. But a lawyer needed to be an eloquent speaker, and he was an abysmal failure at that. He decided he would give up law. It seemed too difficult. With what little money he had, he would retire from the world and attempt somehow to master his speech impediment. At least then he could take on some kind of public career. He built an underground study where he could practice alone. He shaved half his head so he would be too embarrassed to go out in public. To overcome his stammer, he walked along the beach with his mouth full of pebbles, forcing himself to speak without stopping, louder and more forcefully than the waves. He wrote speeches that he then recited while running up steep slopes to develop better breathing techniques. He installed a looking glass in his study, allowing him to monitor closely the looks on his face as he declaimed. He would engage in conversations with visitors to his house and gauge how each word or intonation would affect them. Within a year of such dedicated practice, he had completely eliminated his stammer and had transformed himself into a more than adequate orator. He decided to return to law after all. With each new case that he won, his confidence rose to new heights. Understanding the value of practice, he then worked on improving the delivery of his speeches. Slowly, he transformed himself into the supreme orator of ancient Athens. This newfound confidence translated into everything he did. He became a leading political figure, renowned for his fearlessness in the face of any foe. When you take the time to master a simple process and overcome a basic insecurity, you develop certain skills that can be applied to anything. You see instantly the reward that comes from patience, practice, and discipline. You have the sense that you can tackle almost any problem in the same way. You create for yourself a pattern of confidence that will continue to rise. Internalize the rules of the game. As a law student at Howard University in the early 1930s, Thurgood Marshall could contemplate many injustices that blacks experienced in the United States, but the one that burned in him most deeply was the vast inequalities in education. He had toured the South on fact-finding missions for the NAACP and had seen firsthand the abysmal quality of schools set apart for blacks. And he had felt this injustice himself. He had wanted to go to the University of Maryland near his home. It had an excellent law school. But black students were not admitted there, no matter their academic record. They were directed towards black universities such as Howard, which at the time were inferior. Marshall vowed that someday, in some way, he would help take this unjust system apart. Upon graduation from Howard in 1933, he faced a crucial decision for his future. He had been offered a scholarship at Harvard University to study for an advanced law degree. This represented an incredible opportunity. He could carve out for himself a nice position within the academic world and promote his ideas in various journals. It was also the middle of the Depression, and jobs for black people were few and far between. A degree from Harvard would ensure him a prosperous future. But something impelled Marshall in the opposite direction. He decided instead to set up a private practice in Baltimore and learn from the ground up how the justice system worked. At first, it seemed a foolish decision. He had little work and his debts were mounting. The few cases he had, he lost and he could not figure out why. The justice system seemed to have its own rules and codes to which he had no access. Marshall decided to employ a unique strategy to overcome this. First, he made sure that his legal briefs were masterpieces of research and detail, without any errors or erasures. He made a point of always dressing in the most professional manner and acting with the utmost courtesy, without appearing to bow and scrape. In other words, he gave no one the slightest pretext for judging against him. In this way, he defused suspicion, began to win a few cases, and gained entree to the world of white lawyers. Now he studied that world closely. He saw the importance of certain connections and friendships, power networks he had not known about before. He recognized that certain judges required certain treatment. He learned to talk the language and fit in socially as best he could. He found out that in most cases, it was best to argue on points of narrow procedure rather than on grand concepts. Knowing how to maneuver within these rules and conventions, he began to win more and more cases. In 1935, he took on the University of Maryland on behalf of a black student who had been denied admission to its law school, and won. From then on, he used his knowledge to take on all forms of segregation in the education system, culminating in 1954 with his greatest triumph of all, arguing before the U.S. Supreme Court the case known as Brown v. Board of Education. The court's decision in his favor effectively ended any basis for educational segregation in the United States. What Marshall, who would later become the first African-American appointed to the Supreme Court, had learned by immersing himself in the white-controlled justice system of his time is that the social process is just as important as the legal or technical one. This was not something taught in law school, and yet learning it was the key to his ability to function within the system and advance the cause for which he was fighting. Understand, when you enter a group as part of a job or a career, there are all kinds of rules that govern behavior, values of good and bad, power networks that must be respected, patterns to be followed for successful action. If you do not patiently observe and learn them well, you will make all kinds of mistakes without knowing why or how. Think of social and political skills as a craft that you must master as well as any other. In the initial phase of your apprenticeship, you must do as Marshall did and mute your colors. Your goal here is not to impress people with your brilliance, but to learn these conventions from the inside. Watch for telling mistakes that others have made in the group and for which they have paid a price that will reveal particular taboos within the culture. With a deepening knowledge of these rules, you can begin to maneuver them for your purpose. If you find yourself confronting an unjust and corrupt system, it is much more effective to learn its codes from the inside and discover its vulnerabilities. Knowing how it works, you can take it apart, for good. Attune yourself to the details. As a young student artist in late 15th century Italy, Michelangelo had to confront a personal limitation. He had grand concepts of things he wanted to paint and sculpt, but not the requisite skill. He looked at the masterpieces of other artists and wanted his own work to have a similar aura and effect, but he was frustrated at the flatness and conventionality of what he created. He tried an experiment. He began to copy his favorite masterworks down to the smallest brush stroke, and he discovered that the effect he had so admired was embedded in certain details, the way these artists were able to make figures or landscapes come to life by their intense attention to the fine points. And so began a remarkable apprenticeship to his craft that would last the rest of his life and completely alter his way of thinking. In creating his sculptures, he became obsessed with bone structure, but the books and techniques on the subject seemed woefully inadequate. He started dissecting human corpses one after another. This gave him a profound feel for human anatomy that he could now reproduce in his work. He developed an interest in texture, how each kind of fabric would fold in its own way. He worked on perfecting his reproduction of clothes. He extended these studies of detail to animals and how they moved. When he was commissioned to do his larger pieces, he avoided that old temptation of beginning with some grand concept. Instead, he looked at the material he was to work with, the space, the individual figures that might comprise it, and from there he would conceive the overall shape and effect. In this intense attention to detail, Michelangelo seemed to have discovered the secret for making his figures come to life in a way that exceeded any other artist of his time. Often when you begin a project of any kind, it is from the wrong end. You tend to think first of what you want to accomplish, imagining the glory and money it will bring you if it succeeds. You then proceed to make this concept come to life. But as you go forward, you often lose patience, because the small steps to get there are not nearly as exciting as the ambitious visions in your head. You must try instead the opposite approach, which can lead to very different results. You have a project you wish to bring to life, but you begin by immersing yourself in the details of the subject or field. You look at the materials you have to work with, the tastes of your target audience, and the latest technical advances in the field. You take pleasure in going deeper and deeper into these fine points. Your research is intense. From this knowledge, you shape the project itself, grounding it in reality rather than in airy concepts in your head. Operating this way helps you slow your mind down and develop patience for detailed work, an essential skill for mastering any craft. Rediscover your natural persistence. This is the dilemma we all face. To accomplish anything worthwhile in life generally takes some time, often in blocks of years. But we are creatures who find it very hard to manage such long periods. We are immersed in the day-to-day. Our emotions fluctuate with each encounter. We have immediate desires we are constantly working to satisfy. In that long period of time that we need to reach a goal, we are assailed by 1,000 distractions and temptations that seem more interesting. We lose sight of our objectives and end up following some detour. This is the source of so many of the failures in our lives. To force yourself past any obstacle or temptation, you must be persistent. As children, we all had this quality because we were single-minded. You must simply rediscover and redevelop this character trait. First, you must understand the role that your energy level plays in mastering a process and bringing something to completion. If you take on added goals or new tasks, your focus will be broken up and you will never attain what you wanted in the first place. You cannot persist on 2 or 3 paths, so avoid that temptation. Second, try breaking things up into smaller blocks of time. You have a large goal, but there are steps along the way and steps within the steps. These steps represent months instead of years. Reaching these smaller goals gives you a sense of tangible reward and progress. This will make it easier for you to resist any diversions along the way and fearlessly push ahead. Remember, anything will give way to a sustained, persistent attack on your part. Reversal of perspective. We generally experience boredom as something painful and to be avoided at all costs. From childhood on, we develop the habit of immediately looking for some activity to kill the feeling. But this activity, if repeated often enough, becomes boring as well. And so for our entire lives, we must search and search for novel amusements, new friends, new trends to latch on to, new forms of entertainment, new religions or causes to believe in. This search might lead us to change our careers and set us on a path of meandering here and there in search of something to dull the sensation. But in all of these cases, the root of the problem is not boredom itself, but our relationship to it. Try to look at boredom from the opposite perspective, as a call for you to slow yourself down, to stop searching for endless distractions. This might mean forcing yourself to spend time alone, overcoming that childish inability to sit still. When you work through such self-imposed boredom, you will find your mind clicks into gear. New and unexpected thoughts will come to you to fill the void. To feel inspired, you must first experience a moment of emptiness. Use such moments to assess the day that went by, to measure where you are headed. It is a relief to not feel that constant need for outside entertainment. On a higher level of this re-education, you might choose a book to overcome your boredom, but instead of reading being a passive process of diversion, you actively mentally engage the author in an argument or discussion, making the book come to life in your head. At a further point, you take up a side activity, cultural or physical, that requires a repetitive process to master. You discover a calming effect in the repetitive element itself. In this way, boredom becomes your great ally. It helps you to slow things down, develop patience and self-discipline. Through this process, you will be able to withstand the inevitable empty moments of life and convert them into your own private pleasures. Now there are individuals who would rather perish than work without taking pleasure in their work. They are choosy and have no use for ample rewards if the work is not itself the reward of rewards. They do not fear boredom as much as work without pleasure. Indeed, they need a lot of boredom if their work is to succeed. For all inventive spirits, boredom is that disagreeable lull of the soul that precedes a happy voyage and cheerful winds. Friedrich Nietzsche, Chapter 9, push beyond your limits self-belief. Your sense of who you are will determine your actions and what you end up getting in life. If you see your reach as limited, that you are mostly helpless in the face of so many difficulties, that it is best to keep your ambitions low, then you will receive the little that you expect. Knowing this dynamic, you must train yourself for the opposite. Ask for more, aim high, and believe that you are destined for something great. Your sense of self-worth comes from you alone, never the opinion of others. With a rising confidence in your abilities, you will take risks that will increase your chances of success. People follow those who know where they are going. So cultivate an air of certainty and boldness, the hustler's ambition. Let me point out to you that freedom is not something that anybody can be given. Freedom is something people take, and people are as free as the want to be. James Baldwin, Curtis Jackson's mother, Sabrina, had one powerful ambition in her life, to somehow make enough money to move her and her son far away from the hood. She had had Curtis when she was 15, and the only reasonable outlet at that age for making any good money was dealing drugs. It was a particularly dangerous life for a female hustler, and so she built up an intimidating presence to protect herself. She was tougher and more fearless than many of the male dealers. Her only soft spot was her son. She wanted a different fate for him than hustling. To shelter him from the life she led, she had him stay with her parents in Southside Queens. As often as possible, she would show up with presents for the boy and to keep an eye on him. Someday soon, they would move to a better place. As part of a drug beef, Sabrina was murdered at the age of 23, and from that moment on, it looked like Curtis's fate in this world had been sealed. He was now essentially alone, no parents or real mentor to give him a sense of direction. It seemed almost certain that the following scenario would play itself out. He would drift towards life on the streets. To prove his toughness, he would eventually have to resort to violence and crime. He would find his way into the prison system, and he would probably return for several stints. His life would basically be confined to this neighborhood, and as he got older he could turn to drugs or alcohol to see him through, or at best a series of menial jobs. All the statistics on parentless children growing up in such an environment pointed towards this limited and bleak future. And yet, in his mind, something much different was taking shape. With his mother gone, he spent more and more time alone and began to indulge himself in fantasies that carried him far beyond his neighborhood. He saw himself as a leader of some sort, perhaps in business or in war. He visualized in great detail the places where he would live, the cars he would drive, the outside world he would someday explore. It was a life of freedom and possibility. But these were not mere fantasies, they were real. They were destined to happen. He could see them clearly. Most important, he felt that his mother was looking after him. Her energy and ambition were inside him now. Oddly enough, he would follow in her footsteps with the same plan, to hustle and get out of the game. To avoid her fate, he forged an intense belief that nothing could stop him. Not a gunshot, the schemes of other hustlers, or the police. These streets would not confine him. In May of 2000, Curtis, now known as 50 Cent, somehow survived the 9 bullets that a hired assassin had pumped into his body. The timing of the attack had been particularly poignant. After years of hustling on the streets and in music, his first album had been about to come out. But then, in the aftermath of the shooting, Columbia Records canceled the album and dropped him from the label. He would have to start all over. In the months to come, as he lay in bed recovering from his wounds, he began to reconstruct himself mentally, much as he had done after the murder of his mother. He saw in his mind, in even fresher detail than ever, the path he would now have to take. He would conquer the rap world with a mixtape campaign the likes of which no one had ever seen before. It would come from his intense energy, his persistence, the even tougher sound he would create, and the image he would now project of an indestructible gangsta. Within a year of the shooting, he was on his way to making this vision a reality. His first songs hit the streets and created a sensation. As he progressed on this path, however, he saw one very large impediment still blocking his path. The assassins were looking to finish the job and they could show up at any moment. 50 was forced to keep a low profile and stay on the run, but this feeling of being hunted was intolerable. He would not live this way, and so he decided that what he needed was a group of tight-knit disciples who would help protect him and overcome his sense of isolation. To make this a reality, he told his closest friends to convene a meeting in his grandparents' house in Southside Queens. They were to invite his most fervent fans in the neighborhood, the young men whom they knew to be loyal and dependable, and they should all bring guns to help secure the street before 50.
Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and the likes. I make likes every day, by the way.